Chapter 511. Wuming's eyes widened, showing that his heart was not calm. After Wuming finished releasing his noble phantasm, the sky had become cloudless. Wuming's eyes sharpened as he was drenched in the sudden rain of the sun. Wuming suddenly appeared in front of Tamamonome. Wuming stretched out his hand and directly grabbed Tamamonome's white neck. However, the magical power attached to Wuming's hand that was holding Tamamonome's neck showed that Wuming was not joking. Even if she was a servant, she would not be able to survive if her neck was broken. "How did you know this name?" Wuming's tone had a hint of murderous intent. That's right, Wuming was not surprised that she wanted to marry him, although he was a little bit concerned about it. Cough cough. Wuming was surprised that she knew his name Wuming. Even among the people who knew him, there were only a few people who knew his name Wuming. In addition, the 3 extra holy grails at this singularity were arranged by the Magic King. Wuming had to guess whether Tamamonome knew his name because of the Magic King. Or perhaps Tamamonome was simply a thug sent by the Magic King to deal with Wuming. At this moment, Wuming's mental power was completely released, and the range of thousands of meters had entered Wuming's perception range. Wuming's mental power was not only used to detect whether there were other enemies or traps around, but also to see if he had fallen into his opponent's illusion. Although Wuming could be said to be immune to illusion, Wuming was only immune to his own illusion. If it was not used on Wuming himself but used to change the surrounding environment, Wuming might still fall into the trap if he was not aware of it. To make a simple analogy, if you put an illusion on a stone, in theory let the stone think that it was a flower, then the stone would think that it was a flower, and then with the help of magical power, it would make people see that there was a flower in the original position of the stone. It was similar to a simple magic trick. However, now that Wuming had completely released his mental power, he did not have to worry. The other party did not play any tricks. "I learned about your identity through touching the Holy Grail, Wuming-sama." Tamamonome did not care about Wuming strangling her neck, as if she trusted Wuming, and smiled. "Holy Grail?" Hearing Tamamonome's words, Wuming thought of such an example, but the other party did not come into contact with the Holy Grail, but with him. Back in Winterwood City, Stheno, the eldest of the 3 Gorgon goddesses, obediently submitted to Wuming because she came into contact with Wuming and learned of his identity. Strictly speaking, Stheno had the divinity of the Earth Mother, and Tamamonome also had an extremely close relationship with Amaterasu Amikami. If Tamamonome learned of Wuming's identity because she came into contact with the Holy Grail, it would not be unreasonable. Compared to Stheno, who came into contact with him and learned of his information, Wuming felt that it was more reasonable for Tamamonome to learn of his information because she came into contact with the Holy Grail. Although Wuming didn't have the same knowledge as Karna, he also monitored Tamamonome's every move, including a series of details such as breathing, every hair moved by the wind, and so on. In addition, Wuming found that there was indeed no other servant-level magic power in this hall except for the servant-level magic power in front of him. There was no doubt that Tamamonome did not lie. Wuming slowly loosened his hand holding Tamamonome's neck and looked at Tamamonome deeply. "I still can't completely believe you. If you want to prove yourself, then you have to stay here. If I find you elsewhere, I will immediately regard you as an enemy and kill you at all costs. How about it?" After all, if the other party lied, then it was most likely the Magic King's trick. In that case, it was a risk to let Tamamonome stay here for a second. That was why Wuming said that he would kill Tamamonome at all costs. After hearing Wuming's words, Tamamonome nodded happily. There was no doubt that Tamamonome agreed. "No problem, I will wait here for my husband to come back and pick me up. I wish my husband good luck." With that, Tamamonome bent her upper body, folded her hands, and lay on the ground like a Japanese woman saluting her husband. Facing Tamamonome calling him husband, Wuming frowned. "This is only the first time we've met. You've only learned about me from the Holy Grail, and you've already taken the liberty to say that you want to marry me. I will definitely reject such shallow love. Don't call me husband anymore." Marriage without love is meaningless in Wuming's view. Wuming is not a man who can't walk away when he sees a beautiful woman, and he won't readily agree just because the other party is throwing herself at him. After all, Wuming still has a few love debts. How can he add one more? "Yes, I understand, Selen-sama." This time, Wuming nodded with satisfaction. She didn't call him Wuming but Selen-sama. This means that she is a smart person. Wuming likes to deal with smart people. "Then you can stay here. You didn't lie, I will come back and thank you." With that, Wuming immediately turned and left. "I wish you good luck." After Wuming's figure disappeared, Tamamonome smiled again. Such an excellent husband will be taken away by others if I don't hurry. I am the Tamamonome who wants to be a virtuous wife, and I have already given you a greeting gift, my husband." Although she said that, Tamamonome's eyes were a bit scary. Unfortunately, Wuming had already left and didn't see this scene. On the way back to the city gate, Wuming began to think about the information he collected so far. According to Tamamonome's information as well as Wuming's own investigation, Shutendaji was no longer in the central hall. There were two reasons why Shutendaji set up this poison city. First, she needed to make Wuming think that she was in the center of the poison city. After all, if they were to fight, Shutendaji's domain would be very advantageous. However, Wuming forgot that last time, even after Shutendaji left, her noble artifact could still operate on its own. This time it might be the same. Then why did this self-operating poison city attract Wuming? Naturally, it was to let Shutendaji escape. This was also the second reason. The entire place was filled with magic, filled with poison. Under normal circumstances, Wuming wouldn't be able to detect small magic movements. This way, it was very likely that Shutendaji had already escaped from the city. From Wuming's point of view, Shutendaji wasn't a demon who would run away before a fight even started. Not to mention Ibaraki Duji was still here. And even if Shutendaji left, where could she go? There was only one answer, which was to find Gadatsi and Matthew outside the city. Although Shutendaji wouldn't run away because of fear, he wasn't an idiot either. He wouldn't just sit there and wait for an enemy that he couldn't defeat to find trouble with him. Thus, the wisest choice was to lead the main force away and ambush the enemy's weak point. And what if Shutendaji was the follower sent by the Magic King? Gadatsi was the only hope for humanity, at least for now. Then, as long as he eliminated Gadatsi, the Magic King wouldn't have any worries. As for why Shutendaji was so sure that only Wuming and Karna would come in, it could only be said that this was very likely a part of the plan. Wuming guessed that even if Gadatsi and Matthew came in, Shutendaji probably had a way to separate them. As expected of the leader of the Great Mountains, the son of the great god Ibaraki. His brain isn't any worse than a human's. Humans didn't have power, so they honed their intelligence. Demons had power, so they abandoned their intelligence. And as the son of the demon god, Shutendaji was very smart. Now there was someone in front of him who was stalling for time. Shutendaji told me that even if I die today, I'll drag you here. Chapter 5:12. Ibaraki Duji said domineeringly to Wuming. The bone sword in his hand was faintly discernible. Although he couldn't tell if Ibaraki Duji was also immune to the Holy Grail, he was able to walk through the poison as if it didn't exist. But then again, since he lived so close to Shutendaji all year round and wasn't poisoned, he should have some sort of immunity. Who cares? There was one thing that was without a doubt: Ibaraki Duji was sent by Shutendaji to stop Wuming. "You're quite well-mannered, Ibaraki." Wuming greeted Ibaraki Duji. "Waha, it's alright, after all, I have something like the Holy Grail." Asterisk cough cough. Asterisk shut up, you and I aren't close enough to greet each other. Ibaraki Duji laughed, but then realized that this was an enemy, so he quickly changed his attitude. No matter how he looked at it, Ibaraki Duji seemed unreliable, but no matter what, he was still the well-known Rashomon ghost Ibaraki Duji. "If that's the case, then Shutendaji must have gone to find Karna," Silence said calmly. Shutendaji is obviously looking for that human girl. Why would he go find that terrifying son? Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Of course, it's not that Shutendaji is afraid of that guy, it's just that there's no need to understand. The son was obviously referring to Karna. Like a child, Ibaraki Duji was trying very hard to protect Shutendaji. "Is that so? Thank you, Ibaraki Duji." Wuming smiled lightly. Now he was sure of Shutendaji's whereabouts. On the other hand, Shutendaji, who heard Wuming's thanks, had a strange expression. "Forget it, I don't care what you're saying. If it wasn't for that son, how could I have escaped so pathetically?" Asterisk cough cough asterisk retreat, and I was even mocked by that sun fox, damn it. Ibaraki Duji didn't realize that he had fallen into Wuming's trap, and was still throwing a tantrum. Sure enough, anything related to the sun isn't a good thing. "You too. Today let me, Ibaraki Dojo, end your light." With a roar, Ibaraki Dojo's left hand stabbed the bone blade into the ground, then raised his right hand and aimed at Wuming. "Thou must experience the true appearance of us ghosts." His right arm, which had been severed by a treacherous scheme and then regained after losing it, had turned into a freak. "Let's go, Hellfire." In an instant, Ibaraki Kito's right hand burned with a strange flame. It turned out that the reason why the servants liked to chant before releasing their noble phantoms was to strengthen their noble phantoms. Of course there was also a saying that it was more handsome. Asterisk cough asterisk just as Wuming was about to release his noble artifact to receive the attack, Wuming realized that Ibaraki boy had not fully released his noble artifact. It's not over yet. Ibaraki Kido's left hand moved away from the bone sword and placed it on his right hand. There's more than just this amount of karmic fire. Let the karmic fire of the great mountains burn. In an instant, the flame on Ibaraki Kido's right arm skyrocketed, showing an extreme golden color. Ibaraki Dojo's body was completely engulfed in flames. The only thing that could be seen was that red to the point of gold, and then gold to the point of blackening. This time Wuming did not dare to be careless. It was obvious that his opponent had combined two noble phantoms into one. Moreover, in Wuming's perception, Wuming clearly noticed that Ibaraki Kido's spiritual base was gradually collapsing. There was no doubt that this was the last noble phantoms of the fused life. Dual noble phantoms coupled with the burning of life, this was the degree of 1 + 1 + 1 greater than 3. The power was much stronger than the previous military noble phantoms, and it was comparable to the holy sword. In short, Wuming did not have the confidence to block Ibaraki Kido's double noble phantoms that sacrificed his life. However, Ibaraki Kido's action of burning life touched Wuming's heart. Wuming remembered what Ibaraki Kido had said before. Even if I die today, I will drag you here with me. Those who could become heroic spirits were all heroes without exception. However, the reason why anti-heroes could become heroic spirits and enter the martyr's palace was because of their merits. Entering the martyr's palace after death was not only a comfort of losing one's freedom, but also a recognition of two great restraints. Wuming was deeply touched by Ibaraki Kido's spirit of sacrificing himself for Shitendaji, which went beyond friendship. Wuming smiled gratifyingly. Then I'll properly receive your strongest attack, Ibaraki Kido. After saying that, the spear in Wuming's hand dissipated into mana. Wuming opened his arms, and the armor on his body was completely removed from Wuming's body. Wuming's noble phantoms were permanent noble phantoms, but it did not mean that they could not be released. Finally, the removed armor gathered in front of Wuming, constantly changing and combining. A holy knight's shield that was as tall as a person, similar to Matthew's shield, floated in front of Wuming. Wuming was dressed in white. He grabbed the handle behind the shield and placed it on the ground. This is my strongest noble phantoms, the proof of my identity as the strongest knight Vilo-silenced. It's a concept defensive noble phantoms. Ibaraki Kido did not release his noble phantoms. Instead, he quietly listened to Wuming's speech. Wuming did not know if Ibaraki Kido was still alive, as he could no longer sense his aura. Let me see if your feelings for Shitendaji, which surpasses friendship, can break this knight's proof and concept relic. Wuming's words were like an opportunity. After Wuming finished speaking, Ibaraki boy's final noble artifact was released. The black gold ghostly hand left Ibaraki boy. After it left, the ghostly hand continued to expand until it became incomparably huge. It was as if Ibaraki boy had really sacrificed his life. The final cry of the noble artifact sounded incomparably mournful in Wuming's ears. Gift mind Arthur, Arthur's gift armor? Wuming did not shout with all his might like Ibaraki Dojo. Instead, he was like a holy king, calmly and elegantly reading out the true name of the noble artifact. In an instant, the knight's shield that was as tall as a person shone brightly. There was nothing fancy about it. The knight's shield merely released a light film. The defensive wall formed by the light film started from the shield. The light film first enveloped Wuming, then it began to expand up, down, left and right. It was like a giant shield of light that was constantly expanding. When the ghostly hand approached Wuming, it had expanded to a height of 100 meters. It was like a monstrous devil's hand trying to grab Wuming. The defensive wall in front of Wuming seemed to be responding to Ibaraki boy's noble artifact. It expanded to the same width and height as the black gold ghostly hand. In the next second, the giant ghostly hand and the defensive light film came into contact. Rumble. In front of the central hall, Tamamonome was still half kneeling in front of the hall, looking at the nuclear explosion that happened not far away. Because of Wuming's defensive light film, the impact of the explosion did not spread to her. Even the sound of the explosion did not reach her. Before Wuming and Ibaraki boy released their noble artifacts, Tamamonome had already noticed that something was wrong. The magical waves were too strong. She saw with her own eyes that a giant ghostly hand that was constantly expanding collided with the defensive light film. She had witnessed this miracle. Sometimes I'm really jealous of Shitendaji. Tamamonome shook her head as if she was feeling sorry for Ibaraki boy. Then she closed her eyes and fell into silence. After all, Wuming's request was not to move. Tamamonome chose to meditate. On the other hand, Karna and Suzaku Misaki were affected by the explosion. Suzaku Misaki was blown to the side. Karna tried his best to stabilize himself and looked at the explosion. Is this Cylinder's doing? Then I should end this quickly. Outside the city, Gadatsi stood behind Matthew. She was shocked by the huge explosion in the city. Matthew did not have the time to care about the explosion in the city. Instead, he focused on Shitendaji in front of him. However, Shitendaji was not paying attention to Matthew and Gadatsi. Instead, he was looking at the explosion. She could sense that it was Ibaraki boy's noble artifact. He as expected. Ibaraki, you're an idiot. Chapter 513. Although Shitendaji was smiling, his smile wasn't sincere. On the contrary, there was a hint of pain in his smile, but Shitendaji managed to cover it up. She did tell Ibaraki to try his best to stop Wuming, but she didn't tell him to risk his life. Shitendaji liked to tease Ibaraki Duji, but that was also a kind of love. Ibaraki knew this, so he tried to delay Wuming. For the sake of Shitendaji, Ibaraki sacrificed himself. Although they were both servants, it wasn't easy to meet a close friend. Moreover, servants could be said to have a second life. To be able to meet a close friend in a second life, Shitendaji was very happy. He opened his wine gourd, smiled and took a sip. Shitendaji no longer paid attention to the explosion. Then let's continue. I'm looking forward to seeing if the little girl can block my poison. Matthew clenched his teeth with a bitter expression. This time it's really bad. At this time, a white angel walked out from the side. In the center of the explosion where Wuming was. Wuming didn't hear any sound and he didn't see any color other than white. The light membrane calculated the explosion from the collision of the noble phantasm as damage, and the dazzling light from the noble phantasm as damage. Therefore, Wuming's noble phantasm isolated the sound and scene. That was why Wuming could only see white and couldn't hear the explosion. However, one thing was certain. Wuming successfully defended against Ibaraki Duji's noble phantasm. Because Wuming's noble phantasm wasn't destroyed, Wuming didn't die was the best proof. However, this was how it should be. It's such a pity Ibaraki Duji. The concept noble phantasm under the time paradox can't be destroyed by flames comparable to the sacred sword. This was Wuming's biggest cheat. After leaving Connaught, Wuming accidentally obtained a set of worn-out armor. Because of a magic scroll, he came to Camello, and that set of armor became Wuming's armor as a Knight of the Round Table. After Wuming left, Artoria took it back and no one knew where it went. Connaught's timeline was the 5th century BC, while Camelot's timeline was the 5th century AD. If that was the case, it wouldn't be a problem for Wuming to bring the armor to the future. However, the problem lay with the scroll. The scroll that Merlin used to summon him was undoubtedly made by Wuming. He could see that, but the scroll appeared thousands of years ago without any trace. If there was no problem with it, Wuming wouldn't believe it. There was no doubt that this was a problem with the scroll. Before he was summoned by Merlin with the scroll, Wuming had discovered the scroll that contained his own blood and was completely made by himself. Assuming that after Wuming was summoned, Merlin used the scroll that was passed down in the past to summon Wuming, then who made the scroll? Wuming didn't make it, but it was undoubtedly made by Wuming. Wuming had put the scroll in his own space, so the only possibility was the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay. Although the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay was similar to the one made by Wuming, it didn't have Wuming's blood. Assuming that Wuming in Camelot was codenamed Present Wuming, and Wuming in Connaught was Past Wuming, then there was an inference. After the scroll used by Morgan Le Fay in Camelot sucked the present Wuming away, it was also sucked into the spacetime tunnel. There might have been a trace of blood on it. After entering the spacetime tunnel, it went to the past and was found by the past Wuming. Then the past Wuming was sucked away. The scroll wasn't taken away by Wuming, but was passed down 1,000 years in the future, where it was used by Merlin, who then sucked the past Wuming over 1,000 years in the future. The past Wuming was sucked away at the same time as Merlin sucked the Wuming over 1,000 years in the future. The past Wuming was sucked away and became the present Wuming. Wuming rubbed his head, feeling a headache coming on. Looks like I'll have to investigate this thoroughly after returning to the origin. It is still possible for the soundless in the Great Root to know such a thing. After all, administrators have to be good at using their authority. Wuming only used a little bit of administrator authority. through the power of the origin and the power of the Holy Grail held by Maeve, he cheated by recreating the armor that came with the time paradox. The strength of this armor was no doubt no weaker than Avalon's. Since it was made by the origin, it must be a masterpiece. While Wu Ming was thinking, the relic slowly came into contact with him. Since the danger was gone, it was naturally gone. After contact, the shield formed by the armor automatically disintegrated, turning into a new set of armor and attaching itself to Wu Ming's body. This time, the armor was even holier than before, as if the effect of the true name liberation was still there. Wu Ming touched the helmet. Due to the big explosion, he knew from the central hall that the city gate was no longer poisonous. Due to the influence of Ibaraki's karmic fire and Wu Ming's holy light, as well as the storm caused by the explosion, the poison in the soil and the poison in the air were all blown away, burned, and purified. Then Wu Ming looked at Ibaraki Dojo. At this moment, Ibaraki Dojo had completely disappeared. Only the place where Ibaraki Dojo used to be was left with a little bit of magic crystals. Regardless of whether the opponent was alive or dead, Ibaraki Dojo would not be able to survive the final blow of sacrificing his life. Shaking his head, Wu Ming stopped paying attention to this. Then he ran straight to the city gate. After all, there were no enemies blocking the way. Wu Ming ran straight to the city gate using the shortest route between 2 points. Near the city gate, Wu Ming ran into Karna. At this moment, Suzaku Guzan, who was opposite Karna, had disappeared. This meant that Karna had defeated Suzaku Guzan. As expected of Karna. You really won. However, in response to Wu Ming's compliment, Karna shook his head. My opponent went easy on me. This was a bit strange. However, since Karna said that his opponent had gone easy on him, then he must have gone easy on him. Karna would not lie. Let's not talk about this for now. Tachika is in danger. Shitendaji is going to look for her. Then Wu Ming and Karna went to look for Gadatsi. On the way, Karna told Wu Ming about the battle between him and Suzaku Guzan. Suzaku Guzan's exquisite noble phantasm had indeed hit Karna, but it had not seriously injured him. After that, Karna had been fighting Suzaku Guzan in close combat. This was because Karna had discovered that Suzaku Guzan's noble phantasm was based on telekinesis. Therefore, when fighting in close combat, Suzaku Guzan would definitely be wary. In the beginning, because Suzaku Guzan was fighting Karna in close combat, no matter how exquisite her control was, if Karna wanted to play tricks, it was very likely that a few katanas would rebound and hit Suzaku Guzan. This was the disadvantage of being too close to the enemy. Karna had been affected by Wu Ming and Ibaraki Doji's explosion, so he felt that he should end the battle quickly. Then, after releasing the noble phantasm, Suzaku Guzan symbolically dodged and was hit. There was no doubt that Suzaku Guzan had gone easy on him. Although he did not know why Suzaku Guzan had gone easy on him, the outcome was good. Shitendaji was the only one missing. Then, when Wu Ming and Karna found Gadatsi and Matthew, they found that Nightingale had appeared beside them at some point. Shitendaji, on the other hand, was drinking wine with a smile on his face. However, no matter how one looked at him, Shitendaji looked quite depressed. Chapter 5:14. When he saw that Gadatsi was fine, Wu Ming was relieved. It was obvious that Shitendaji didn't attack Gadatsi because of Nightingale, who appeared out of nowhere. I failed completely this time. I don't have a good relationship with this lady. Shitendaji seemed to have given up and said to Wu Ming. Although Wu Ming didn't understand Nightingale's ability, seeing that she was a nurse, he guessed that her noble phantasm should be something like healing or purification. And from Shitendaji's current expression, it could be seen that Nightingale's ability completely restrained her. That's true, Shitendaji. Wu Ming was no longer anxious because there were only 2 servants left in the Nippon faction, and Tamamonome seemed to be on Wu Ming's side. In fact, Wu Ming's guess was correct. When Shitendaji used poison to attack Gadatsi and Matthew, Nightingale calmly walked out of the forest and released her noble phantasm. As a result, Shitendaji's poison was completely purified. At this moment, the wine that Shitendaji drank was poison-free. I have to say, Shitendaji is really unlucky when it comes to luck. Even Gadatsi couldn't help but ridicule. According to Gadatsi's judgment, Shitendaji spent a lot of effort to get out of Denver and attack her, the last master. But in the end, at the final moment, a servant that completely countered Shitendaji appeared out of nowhere. Just how unlucky was Seiji to meet such a servant? After all, Nightingale left in the middle of the night chasing after Achilles, who knew that he would meet her here. Well, actually, I've always been unlucky. Looking at the confident Shitendaji, Wu Ming subconsciously felt that something was wrong. Ming knew just how dangerous Shitendaji was, so he chose to immediately attack Shitendaji. The holy spear pierced towards Shitendaji, but Shitendaji didn't try to defend or dodge. I remember that you are looking for the Holy Grail. Unfortunately, the Holy Grail is no longer in my hands. The holy spear stopped right before Shitendaji's neck. This is the second time we've met, Shitendaji, although I'm not sure if you still remember me. Although Ming spoke to Shitendaji, he still kept the holy spear at Shitendaji's neck. Of course I remember. I clearly remember that you chopped off my head, Shitendaji said in a satisfied tone, not at all like he was being held captive. No matter if it's Ibaraki, Tamamonome, or even Suzuka Guzan, the golden light on their bodies as well as this continuous poison, were all created by me through the Holy Grail. Shitendaji said everything without hesitation. However, I didn't bring the Holy Grail with me. Shitendaji smiled. Then, if Shitendaji didn't bring the Holy Grail with him, where did he put it? The central hall had been infiltrated by his mental power, but there was no trace of the Holy Grail. Suzuka Guzan and Ibaraki Doji had already left. Could it be Tamamonome? Ming fell into deep thought. Ming felt that he had overlooked something. Suddenly, Ming's pupils shrank as he thought of something. This city was undoubtedly a noble artifact, and it was one that had been blessed by the Holy Grail. Suzuka Guzan didn't have such a legend. Although Ibaraki Doji and Shitendaji had said that they had built a city in the mountains, this city wasn't suitable for ghosts. As for Tamamonome, she didn't have any legends of a city. In that case, there must be a hidden follower, and this city must belong to that follower. Shitendaji seemed to have seen through Ming's thoughts and smiled. That's right, I gave the Holy Grail to the owner of this city. After all, I didn't plan to go back, Shitendaji smiled. However, this smile was quite familiar to Ming. It was the same smile that Shitendaji had before he left in the Winterwood City. Pucci, Ming stabbed his spear into Shitendaji's neck, but Shitendaji smiled. She was disappearing bit by bit. Although Shitendaji couldn't speak because Ming had pierced his throat, Ming was able to read Shitendaji's words through the shape of his mouth. I'll be waiting for you in Himeji City. Then Shitendaji turned into magic and dissipated. Rumble, suddenly the earth began to shake violently. Matthew supported Gadatsi, who almost fell. Karna and Nightingale looked behind Ming. Ming turned around and looked at the huge Denver City or Himeji City. In the second half of Himeji City, a huge pillar rose from the ground. Countless eyes were inlaid on this huge pillar of flesh, turning and blinking from time to time. It was very terrifying. That's a demon god pillar? Gadatsi cried out in surprise. After all, Gadatsi had already experienced 4 singularities and encountered many demon god pillars, so she naturally recognized it. Nightingale and Karna were also shocked. After all, the aura emitted by the huge pillar of flesh in the distance was a bit terrifying. While everyone was surprised, Ming shook his head helplessly. I was tricked by Shitendaji again. Shitendaji set up Poison City and sent Ibaraki Doji, Lulu Guzan and Tamamonome to intercept Ming. It seemed that they were going to attack Gadatsi, and Ming would quickly return to protect Gadatsi. But in fact they were misled. With this plan, Ming and others were transferred away, giving the servant at the back of Himeji City an opportunity to summon the demon god pillar. However, according to Shitendaji's words, I'll be waiting for you in Himeji City. It was very likely that this demon god pillar was controlled by Shitendaji. This also proved why it took so long to summon the demon god pillar, because it needed Shitendaji's consciousness to be stored in this huge pillar of flesh. Sure enough, it confirmed Ming's thoughts once again. Even if Shitendaji left, he must have left me a lot of trouble. Karna, you stay with Matthew and Nightingale to protect Tachika. I'll go meet that guy. Ming said to Karna. Karna didn't speak, just nodded and then stood beside Gadatsi. Although Gadatsi always had Matthew by her side, she couldn't guarantee that she could completely protect some powerful servants. Just like Shitendaji just now, Matthew found it a little difficult to defend against the pervasive poisonous gas. Also because of guilt, Matthew didn't speak, but obediently stayed by Gadatsi's side. Gadatsi, on the other hand, seemed to be in a bad mood. That's the demon god pillar, how can I let you go alone? Gadatsi mercilessly rejected Ming's proposal. Although Matthew didn't speak, the worry in his eyes was still seen by Ming. Ming stared blankly then laughed. Don't worry, didn't I say, I'm not an ordinary servant. Ming smiled and comforted the two. But Gadatsi still didn't agree and wanted to refute. Trust me, you and Matthew staying here will make me feel more at ease. Ming looked at Gadatsi and Matthew firmly. It wasn't that the two of them were burdens, well, in fact, it was a little bit. Cough cough. The most important thing was that Wuming believed that the demon god pillar was controlled by Shitendaji. Facing a different demon god pillar, Wuming really didn't feel at ease letting Gidatsi and Matthew go with him. And with Wuming's strength, it wouldn't be too difficult to deal with the demon god pillar with some effort. It was also because of this that Karna agreed to stay and let Wuming go to the battlefield alone. Although the two of them seemed to be tied in the previous battle, Karna knew that he couldn't beat Wuming, who cheated. Since that was the case, he had enough strength on the battlefield, so he was responsible for protecting Gidatsi. In the end, Gidatsi and Matthew nodded and chose to believe in Wuming. Wuming realized that one of them was missing. Where did Nightingale go? Gidatsi and Matthew also realized that Nightingale was missing. At this time, Karna, who was loyally acting as a weapon, spoke. As for the nurse, she ran toward the demon god pillar while you were talking. As expected of the obedient Karna. If you don't ask, he won't say. Wuming rubbed his forehead with a slight headache. Chapter 5:15. At the back of Jilu City, the huge tentacle-like demon god pillars were wriggling about. The eyes on the demon god pillars would turn from time to time, blinking, looking particularly terrifying. A strange sound came from the demon god pillar. It was a sound that humans and even servants could not make. This was the unique cry of the demon god pillars. Along with the demon god pillar's cry, dense purple fog was emitted from the demon god pillar's eyes. The purple mist didn't move fast, but it was very powerful. The first half of the Holy Grail enhanced version of Jilu City was basically destroyed by Wuming and Ibaraki's noble artifacts. However, the second half of Jilu City was still intact because of Wuming's noble artifacts. When the purple fog emitted by the demon god pillars came in contact with the palaces and pavilions of Jilu City, the moment it came in contact with them, those palaces and pavilions were immediately corroded. It was like a deadly poison. Although the purple fog moved slowly because it didn't encounter any resistance, gradually the buildings in the back half of Jilu City, with the demon god pillars as the center, melted away. Taking a closer look, nearly half of the buildings in the back half of Jilu City had been corroded and melted away. The melted buildings were like ordinary water that blended into the ground. Although the ground wasn't decayed, the gradual blackening of the ground proved that it didn't escape the corrosion of the poison. Nightingale pledge, I will eradicate all poisons and all harmful things. In an instant, along with the release of the true name of this precious artifact, a part of the purple mist in front of the demon god pillar disappeared, including the ground that had already turned black. The ground returned to its original color. Not only that, but there were also signs of sprouting on the ground that was covered by the relic. Oh, it's your nurse again? We really don't get along well. At this moment, Shitendaji's voice came from the demon god pillar. However, the demon god pillar's voice wasn't completely Shitendaji's. There was a strange sound mixed in as well, which was probably the demon god pillar's own voice. Without a doubt, Wuming's guess was correct. However, Nightingale did not answer demon god Shooting's question. Instead, she tried her best to unleash her noble artifact. Nightingale's noble phantasm, I will eradicate all poisons, all harmful things, forbidden phantasm, was an area with Nightingale as the center. It could nullify all poisons and attacks. This noble phantasm was a concept noble phantasm. It was a combination of the spiritual sublimation of Nightingale, who galloped on the battlefield and faced death, coupled with various anecdotes of her, as well as the concept of angel in white who helped the sick and wounded, which was established in modern times. It was proven that a concept relic had an advantage over a physical relic. It was a grade C+ anti-army relic. I will eradicate all poisonous and harmful creatures. The territory that it displayed was like an invincible holy territory. There was no poison or harm at all. The surrounding purple fog surged violently into this area, intending to corrode it. However, no matter how much of it was useless. The poison that entered was completely eliminated by this precious artifact. As this noble phantasm was centered around Nightingale, while Nightingale was unleashing her noble phantasm, she was constantly moving towards demon god Shooting. However, as the range of the noble phantasm was not very large, the moving Nightingale had already seen such a scene. Amidst a large expanse of purple mist, a circle without any purple mist was moving towards the most important sky pillar. It gave off a feeling of a mantis trying to stop a chariot and overestimating its own capabilities. However, that was the truth. Looking at Nightingale who was moving towards him with all her might, demon god Shooting laughed. If it was the previous me, you would indeed be my nemesis. However, this is a demon god pillar, Miss Nurse. The moment demon god Shutting finished speaking, an even thicker dark purple fog emerged from behind the demon god pillar. Just by looking at it, Nightingale, who was a berserker, could feel the danger from it. The dark purple fog contained a large amount of magic and rushed towards Nightingale's noble phantasm domain at an extremely fast speed. No matter what it was, there was a limit to it. Wu Ming's almost infinite magic, Avalon, which was rumored to be able to block even a world-defying noble phantasm, and Nightingale's noble phantasm domain were the same. The reason why Wu Ming's magic was said to be infinite was because of his overly large base, super recovery speed, and the fact that he had no place to use these 3 points. The reason why Avalon could block the world-defying noble phantasm was because Avalon had not encountered a stronger attack. At the very least, Wu Ming believed that if he used the Great Source to launch an attack, Avalon would not be able to block it. Since that was the case, Nightingale's noble phantasm domain also had its limits. It seemed like Nightingale's noble phantasm could completely restrain Shutting Doji's poison. However, if it encountered a large amount of poison that could not be eliminated in time, or if it was not poison but a powerful magic attack, Nightingale's noble phantasm domain might not be able to eliminate it completely. Demon God Shutting had such a plan. He did not continue to release poison. Instead, he released the Demon God Pillar's Demon Fog skill. The powerful Demon Fog surged towards Nightingale's domain. As expected, although Nightingale's noble phantasm had eliminated part of the mana fog, most of it remained and continued to fly toward Nightingale within the noble phantasm. Nightingale did not say a word, allowing the dark purple fog to gradually approach her. She knew that she could not resist it. Mystery would be ineffective in front of a higher level of mystery. This was probably the theory behind it. Nightingale was considered a modern person. In terms of mystery, she was much weaker than the Demon God Pillar. Moreover, Nightingale's noble phantasm was only a grade C noble phantasm. It was impossible for it to eliminate any damage. In this case, Nightingale, who did not have any other powerful abilities, might be defeated this time due to Berserker's impulsiveness. However, she did not regret it. If she wanted Berserker to regret it, she might have to wait until her next life. Of course, if Nightingale was alone, she would definitely be defeated here. However, there was no doubt that Nightingale was not alone. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of chains, Nightingale was tied up by a silver-white chain and was pulled out of the attack range of the dark purple fog. Oh, you're not satisfied with the speed? Demon God Shutting spoke again. After all, no matter if it's Shitendaji or the Demon God Pillar, they're all my enemies, Wu Ming replied Demon God Shutting calmly as he kept the pseudo-heavenly lock back into the golden ripple. As Nightingale's noble phantasm was still activated, although the poisonous fog had spread over, it did not corrode Wu Ming. Then play with me for a while. My new enemy. Looking at the dark purple fog that was controlled by Demon God Shutting, Wu Ming began to recall what Tamamonome had said. Chapter 5:16. Wu Ming was on his way to Demon God Shutting. When Wu Ming passed by the central Great Hall, he discovered that Tamamonome was still sitting on the platform in front of the hall, not moving at all. And at this moment, the omnipresent poison gas was emitted from the central Great Hall, about to reach Tamamonome. Even people who didn't know what the mist was would feel danger, let alone Wu Ming who knew what the purple mist was. Wu Ming extended his hand and golden ripples appeared. The pseudo-heaven lock appeared from the ripples and in an instant, the pseudo-heaven lock wrapped around Tamamonome. Immediately afterwards, Wu Ming waved his hand and the chains pulled Tamamonome over. Tamamonome didn't resist and let Wu Ming pull her over with the chains. Catching Tamamonome and retrieving the chains, Wu Ming asked subconsciously, "Why are you still here? The Demon God Pillar's attack is already here." The reason why Wu Ming asked this was because even if Tamamonome had the immunity granted by the Holy Grail, even if she could defend against the Demon God Pillar's poison, the Demon God Pillar still had other attacks. Since the poison gas could reach here, the Demon God Pillar's other attacks would naturally be able to as well. However, in response to Wu Ming's question, Tamamonome smiled sweetly. "Didn't you tell me to stay here? This is your promise?" Tamamonome winked at Wu Ming like a mischievous child. With Tamamonome's words, Wu Ming felt rather awkward. Actually, Wu Ming didn't care about his words at all. Seeing that Tamamonome had told him the truth, Wu Ming only warned Tamamonome not to play any tricks behind his back. Wu Ming only used the words "stay here and don't go anywhere" to warn her. Wu Ming didn't think that Tamamonome wouldn't do anything in the face of danger. Who would have thought that Tamamonome would be so serious? Take it that I didn't say it well. However, remember this. You can go back on an unimportant agreement like this when your life is in danger. Wu Ming said very seriously. But, that was my first promise with you. I don't want to break it just like that. However, since you personally came to help me break the promise, then I'll let it go this time. Tamamonome smiled, acknowledging Wu Ming's words. Also, Lord Sarander, how much longer are you planning to hug me? Tamamonome smiled innocently. Wu Ming's expression turned awkward, and he quickly put down Tamamonome. After using the pseudo-heaven lock to pull Tamamonome over, Wu Ming withdrew the heaven lock. Wu Ming then hugged Tamamonome like hugging a cat. Speaking of which, hugging Tamamonome was no different from hugging a cat. Cough cough. Back to the main topic. Since you've kept your promise, I'll temporarily treat you as my partner. Keep walking towards the city gate and meet up with Chaldea's master. Although Wu Ming said that he would treat Tamamonome as his partner purely because of the promise, Wu Ming did not completely believe him. Who would completely believe a strange woman who was originally an enemy but suddenly said that she wanted to marry you when she saw you? Seeing that Tamamonome did not try anything funny, Wu Ming decided to temporarily let her join the party. Moreover, even if Tamamonome betrayed him, it would be fine. Karnak was there, so he was not afraid of Tamamonome betraying him. Tamamonome nodded regretfully as if she was unhappy that she did not become his wife. However, Tamamonome seemed to have thought of something and she nodded honestly and then asked, "What about you, Lord Sarander? If I'm not wrong, you're going to destroy the demon god pillars, right?" Wu Ming naturally nodded and admitted it. There was nothing to hide. Could it be that Wu Ming came here specifically to save Tamamonome? Wu Ming and Tamamonome's relationship was not that good. Regarding this, I have something to say. Tamamonome bowed to Wu Ming, as if she was really putting herself in the position of a subject. Wu Ming nodded. Since there was information, he naturally had to listen to it. After Wu Ming nodded, Tamamonome spoke. Actually, the Holy Grail was placed with Judge Ji, but I feel that this matter has nothing to do with her. It was completely planned by Shitendaji. You are indeed the concubine of justice. Wu Ming nodded. Previously, when Shitendaji had mouthed to Wu Ming to wait for you in Jiro City, Wu Ming had more or less guessed it. After all, Jiro City was the residence of Judge Ji, the monster of the city. It wasn't strange for it to become a noble artifact. Actually, when your noble artifact landed in this city, even though Judge Haim borrowed the power of the Holy Grail, in order to resist your somewhat cheating noble artifact, Judge Haim herself probably didn't have a good time waiting for me. Shitendaji didn't take back the Holy Grail and instead left it with Judge Haim. Hearing this, Wu Ming came to a realization. This made sense. Even if Wu Ming's abnormal cheating noble artifact was blocked by Jiro City, it shouldn't have left Jiro City in ruins. It shouldn't have left anything behind and directly exploded into ashes. If he borrowed the power of the Holy Grail, then it made sense. Listen to your nonsense. Have you never seen Judge Ji? Wu Ming asked. After all, Tamamonome's words showed that she didn't know the truth. That's right, Sarander-sama. Shitendaji asked me to stand guard here after Punbuji blocked your noble artifact. I will try my best to delay you with the formation of the formation. Suzuka Guzan and Ibaraki Doji were also sent out. Then, Wu Ming knew what happened after that. Karna stalled Suzaku Guzan. Wu Ming came here and was told the reason by Tamamonome, and when he returned he was stopped by Ibaraki. They fought and Ibaraki self-destructed. In the end, Shitendaji died, but the demon god pillar was summoned. Actually, I wanted to visit Judge Ji after you left and retrieve the Holy Grail for you. But because of the agreement between you and me, I didn't do so. Wu Ming raised his eyebrows. So you're blaming me? Okay, it seems like you're blaming me. Asterisk cough cough asterisk Wu Ming shook his head and said, I don't think that even if you take the Holy Grail away, the demon god pillar can't be summoned. Wu Ming believed that Shitendaji's death was the trigger for the demon god pillar to be summoned. It was very likely that Shitendaji had done something to the Holy Grail from the beginning, using his own life as the trigger. Once Shitendaji left, the Holy Grail would automatically activate and summon the demon god pillar with Shitendaji's consciousness. Moreover, it's hard to say if you can defeat Judge Ji. Actually, when Wu Ming was hugging Tamamonome, Wu Ming had already noticed that Tamamonome didn't have much fighting strength. Compared to the white-faced, golden-haired nine-tailed fox Tamamonome who was recorded as one of the three demons, the current Tamamonome was just a support fox. Although that's the case, I don't think that Judge Ji will fight back. Tamamonome smiled. This made Wu Ming puzzled. Could it be that these two were good friends? Chapter 517. Facing Wuming's doubts, Tamamonome covered her mouth with her sleeve and smiled. That's what your concubine thinks. That's why your concubine said that the summoning of the demon god pillar had nothing to do with Judge Haim. Damn, she's even keeping me in suspense. Wuming shook his head helplessly. Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Nightingale probably can't hold on any longer. With that, Wuming prepared to leave. Wuming-sama. Tamamonome suddenly opened her mouth and called Wuming by his real name. Huh? Wuming turned his head and stared at Tamamonome. Facing Wuming's stare, Tamamonome smiled apologetically and said, "You're an existence blessed by Amaterasu Amikami's incarnation. Make good use of that power." With that, Wuming left. After all, if he delayed any longer, Nightingale really wouldn't be able to hold on. Following that, Wuming recalled the scene from before. Wuming used the pseudo-heaven lock to pull Nightingale back. Blessing from the sun god? Wuming recalled Tamamonome's words and thought of the sun rain. By the way, Shitendaji, have you ever felt the despair brought by the sun? With that, Wuming closed his eyes and began to feel the mysterious power that entered his body without him noticing. I didn't even feel despair from Minamoto no Reiko. Can you make me feel despair? Demon god Shitendaji let out a strange sound. Following that, he began to make the first move. The countless eyes on the demon god pillar spun faster and faster, gathering magical power. Following that, each eye released a heat ray comparable to a holy sword. The heat rays gathered together and formed a huge pillar of light with a diameter of 100 meters, attacking Wuming and Nightingale. Wuming opened his eyes and waved his hand. Gate. Nightingale chanted a simple incantation, and a purple ripple appeared beneath her feet. Nightingale fell down in an instant. After Wuming heard a scream, Nightingale was completely engulfed by the purple ripples. Arthur's gift armor. After releasing the concept relic once again, the armor on Wuming's body detached and formed a shield. The shield formed a light film and welcomed the heat rays that the demon god shutting shot out. ZZZ, the expected explosion did not happen. The shield's light membrane disintegrated all the heat rays from the demon god wine swallowing, turning them into pure magic power that spread out in all directions with a sizzling sound. Gate. Chanting the incantation again, Wuming's figure behind the shield disappeared, leaving only a purple ripple. Suddenly, the demon god pillar made an incomprehensible sound. It was a scream that belonged to the demon god pillar. Behind the demon god pillar, Wuming was holding his holy spear. The front half of the holy spear had already pierced one of the eyes behind the demon god pillar. Although there were eyes behind the demon god pillar, because Wuming appeared too quickly, the demon god pillar did not react at all. As for how Wuming came over, the purple ripple that was slowly closing behind Wuming became a powerful explanation. Wuming could use the teleportation portal to any place he had been to and any place he could see. Wuming pulled the holy spear out of the demon god pillar's eye, jumped back and left the demon god pillar's body. The moment he left, a large amount of dark purple fog appeared from the eyes of the surrounding demon god pillars. Without a doubt, if Wuming did not dodge, he would have been enveloped by the dark purple fog. Without the protection of his armor, Wuming did not dare be careless. Even if the dark purple fog did not seem like poisonous fog, who knew whether it would dissolve in an instant? Because of the damage, the demon god pillar stopped releasing heat rays. And because of this, Wuming's noble artifact also stopped. However, Wuming did not let the noble artifact recover his armor. Compared to the permanent noble artifact's armor form, the shield form after true name liberation was much more useful. However, it was unable to move in time. The demon god Jiotun naturally noticed that the shield did not arrive at Wuming's side in time. Immediately, the eyes behind the demon god pillar began to revolve violently. Along with the condensation of magic, heat rays were also released. The target was naturally Wuming, who was behind the demon god pillar. Gate. The shield that appeared from the purple ripple blocked the demon god pillar's attack. Although the shield itself was unable to come over in time, Wuming had a way to make the shield come over. The teleportation gate that Wuming used to teleport behind the demon god pillar was not closed. Wuming expanded it and opened another teleportation gate in front of him. Naturally, the shield could come over. Next, Wuming used the teleportation gate to launch a sneak attack on the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar attacked Wuming, while Wuming used the teleportation gate to block the damage. Although it seemed like Wuming had the advantage, that was not the case. Because Wuming had the concept noble artifact, the demon god pillar was unable to hurt Wuming. However, Wuming's attacks were also ineffective against the demon god pillar. Wu Ming stabbed in different places with his spear. However, after stabbing, the demon god pillar's powerful body would heal his injuries. One was the Dragon of Origin's spiritual base, while the other was the demon god pillar controlled by Shitendaji. Both of them were life forms with a high degree of mystery. This created a very awkward situation. Wu Ming could not hurt the demon god Shitendaji, while the demon god Shitendaji could not hurt Wu Ming. "Ah, your tortoise shell is really tough." Shitendaji was not upset at all. "Your recovery ability is not bad either, demon god Shitendaji," Wu Ming replied. Since that's the case, I won't play with you anymore." After demon god Shitendaji finished speaking, the huge demon god pillar began to move towards Gadatsi. She was not prepared to fight this unsolvable battle with Wu Ming. She was prepared to get rid of the most important person. Wu Ming would definitely not allow that. Once again he used the teleportation gate to arrive at one of the demon god pillar's eyes and stabbed with the holy spear. The demon god pillar was already used to having its eyes pierced, and because Shitendaji was not prepared to pay attention to Wu Ming, the demon god pillar did not move at all. However, Wu Ming smiled. "Found it." Wu Ming said before that he wanted Shitendaji to experience the despair brought by the sun, and closed his eyes to feel the blessing of the sun rain. Naturally, he would not play such a boring game with demon god Shitendaji. The reason why Wu Ming kept stabbing the demon god pillar was actually to find the holy grail inside the demon god pillar. Wu Ming did not think that the summoned demon god pillar would put the holy grail aside and not devour it. It could be said that without the holy grail, the demon god pillar's strength would definitely decrease. However, Wu Ming did not want to take out or destroy the holy grail. At this moment, a large amount of black fog suddenly enveloped Wu Ming. This was a magic corrosive fog that was even purer than the dark purple fog from before. I already knew that you were looking for the holy grail. You should thank me, I let you find it on purpose." Shitendaji's mocking voice could be heard. After all, Shitendaji was not an idiot. He guessed what Wu Ming was thinking, so he set up this trap to make Wu Ming fall into it. "Of course I knew that this was a trap. After all, if it was you, it would be impossible for me to find the holy grail, so I took the initiative to jump into this trap." Wu Ming's voice came from the black fog, and it was a rather spirited voice. It did not sound like it was being corroded at all. "After all, only this way can I release my authority." Chapter 518. Although Wu Ming had cheated, he did not have any trump cards like the Savior Sword or the 12 clones because of Celander's spiritual base. Wu Ming had only created an ordinary spiritual base in the root of Genesis and sent it to this singularity. Celander's identity was created by Maeve using the Holy Grail, so Wu Ming did not choose to interfere. After all, being invited in and barging in were two different concepts. Moreover, even without the Savior Sword and the 12 clones, Wu Ming was not weak. However, although he wasn't weak, he couldn't really injure demon god Shutting without using a noble artifact. If he wanted to cripple him, he would have to use a super energy storing noble artifact again. However, Wu Ming did not plan to use a relic in the first place. As he had a concept relic to defend himself, the demon god pillar's attack could not hurt Wu Ming. It was a sad story. Therefore, Shitenji could only use the Holy Grail to lure Wu Ming out from behind the tortoise shell. Wu Ming also needed to come into contact with the Holy Grail, so Shitenji's actions helped Wu Ming. Previously, Wu Ming had received the sun rain from Tamamo no Me and received the sun god's blessing passively. After Wu Ming found out that the blessing was from the sun god, he wanted to use it to blow up the demon god Shitenji. How would he blow it up? Of course, he would use his authority to transform into the sun. With the sun god's blessing, Wu Ming did not need to change his class. He could directly use the Holy Grail to connect with the root of Genesis and use the sun god Shitenji. Of course, due to various factors, this move was only a one-time use. After it was used, it would be gone. However, based on the current situation, Wu Ming felt that it was worth it. If the demon god Shitenji was allowed to wreak havoc in the American continent, the entire continent would probably turn into a land of poison in a few days. This proved the saying once again. Even if he left, Shitendaji would still cause trouble for Wu Ming. That was why Wu Ming decided to directly use the sun god's blessing upon seeing Shitendaji turn into a demon god pillar and connect to the Great Origin's usage of the Holy Grail. This was also why Wu Ming wasn't the slightest bit nervous even after falling into Shutting's trap. Because the sun's flames would burn everything. For the sake of victory, quickly come before me. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. Horses with enough intelligence, bring me the light wheel that symbolizes your master. After Wu Ming finished chanting, the fog surrounding Wu Ming began to glow. Boom. A ball of golden flames broke out from the fog with an explosion, starting to burn on the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar once again let out an incomprehensible sound of pain. General Demon God Wine Tun. Immediately afterwards, the golden flames instantly covered the entire demon god pillar. A strange scene appeared in G Road City. The giant pillar burning with golden flames kept twisting, as if trying to get rid of these deadly flames, but it couldn't get rid of them. A deep sense of powerlessness came from this flame pillar. Amaterasu. On the hillside outside G Road City, Tamamonome looked at this scene and said softly. Caster, what did you say? Gadatsi, who was standing beside Tamamonome, asked doubtfully. Nothing, Master-sama. Tamamonome smiled and covered it up. Gadatsi didn't ask again but focused on the giant flame pillar. Just now, the burning of the demon god pillar made Gadatsi shout. She was very excited and now she calmed down. Nightingale, who was teleported by Wuming to Gadatsi's side, saw that the virus was about to be finished and relaxed a lot. Amaterasu. Karna said faintly. He heard Tamamonome's words. Matthew and Karna, 2 people, one on the left and one on the right, stood beside Gadatsi and Tamamonome. The former was guarding his senior and the latter. It seemed that because of the sun attribute, Karna had a good impression of Tamamonome. At least, he could talk to her and wouldn't ignore her. Of course, Tamamonome was also very interested in this same kind. As long as it was related to the sun, it was a good thing. Immediately afterwards, the golden flames slowly disappeared, and the huge demon god pillar disappeared along with it. There was no doubt that the demon god pillar disappeared. With Wuming's power, the sun incarnation disappeared, just like Lev in the Winterwood City. It's just that the demon god pillar, Florence, died and there was still Lev left, but demon god Winetun died, there was nothing left. No, it should be the only thing left. Wuming looked at the original position of the demon god pillar, and thought with a strange expression. At this moment, a girl who was dressed like a Japanese princess was lying on the demon god pillar's position. Her eyes were spinning in a spiral shape. There was no doubt that this girl was unconscious and it wasn't light. Wuming could faintly hear the unconscious girl mumbling something subconsciously. No, no more torture, no more torture. Wuming smiled, not knowing what to do. Looking at this princess girl who was no longer being tortured, she was probably talking about Tamamonome's punishment princess. It seemed that Tamamonome had been brought into the demon god pillar when it appeared. Otherwise, Wuming didn't think that Tamamonome would have been able to survive until now in the demon god pillar's attack range. I think I understand why Tamamonome said that Tamamonome wouldn't be the one who summoned the demon god pillar. Looking at Tamamonome's appearance, she had been unconscious for a long time. She had probably fainted after blocking Wuming's treasured artifact. Shitendaji placing the Holy Grail in front of the unconscious Tamamonome made sense. Shaking his head, Wuming stopped paying attention to Tamamonome and looked at his hand. Wuming held the golden Holy Grail with one hand. Sensing the magic on it, Wuming smiled. He had finally recovered a Holy Grail. Not long after, Gadatsi's group arrived. As if it was a coincidence, when Gadatsi's group arrived, Tamamonome turned into magic and left. After blocking Wuming's treasured artifact, being sucked into the demon god pillar, and being injured by Wuming's sun incarnation, it was already a miracle that she was able to last until Gadatsi's group arrived and didn't leave with the demon god pillar. Placing the Holy Grail in his golden ripples, Wuming looked at Gadatsi and sighed. Finally, the first Holy Grail has been collected. Why do I feel so tired for some reason? Wuming thought. Chapter 519. Wuming did not choose to let Chaldea retrieve the Holy Grail. Not to mention that Chaldea had not been contacted yet. Moreover, even if Wuming was contacted, he would not easily hand over the Holy Grail that he had just obtained to Chaldea's group. It was not that Wuming was greedy, but because Wuming was worried that the Holy Grail newly created by the Magic King would have some kind of trap. Wuming did not think that the Magic King's game would be so simple with only a few forces. However, it seemed that for the current Gadatsi and others, the 5 forces were indeed difficult. However, to Wu Ming, the current chaotic battle between the 5 forces did not pose much of a threat. Although he did not know why the Magic King did not appear in person, even so, he could not do anything to Wu Ming. After all, it was not his main body. However, the Magic King who did not appear gave Wu Ming a feeling that there was something more important that he could not come. However, when they were in the underground of London, the Magic King said to Gadatsi and others that as long as they did not open all 7 singularities, they would not be a threat to him at all. Just like how ordinary people would not care whether ants could hurt them, whether it was 1 ant or 7 ants, it was all the same. According to the Magic King, only when all 7 singularities were saved, would he take the initiative to kill Gadotsi and others. During this time, Wuming did not think that the Magic King would sit in front of the TV and eat popcorn while watching Gadotsi and others take risks. Then there was no doubt that the Magic King also had something to do. However, because of Wuming's intervention, Wuming was not sure whether the Magic King really did not eat popcorn and sit in front of the TV to watch what happened at this singularity. In any case, these new Holy Grails did not make Wuming feel at ease, so Wuming and Gadotsi agreed that the Holy Grails that they obtained later would be temporarily guarded by him. Wuming and others walked out of Jiro City and began to move towards Riverton in the north. Jiro City did not seem to be a noble phantasm that would disappear with the servants. The Japanese forces were destroyed and the Holy Grail was recovered by Wuming, but Jiro City was still there. It was still the same ruins, or even worse, razed to the ground. Let's not talk about the collision between Wu Ming and Ibaraki Boy's noble artifacts. The demon god pillars, poisonous fog and all kinds of destruction were enough to destroy Ji-Wei City, which had lost its defenses due to Ji-Ji's coma and overload. Wu Ming guessed that Shitendaji, because of this, he used the Holy Grail to summon the summoned monsters to leave the summoned monsters, leaving only the servants. Wuming Doji. Gadotsi, Matthew and Nightingale was to be in the middle. In the middle was to the rears. In this way, Wuming Doji's group did not move fast, and it could even be said that they were moving slowly. After all, they had just won a battle, and there was no need to be too anxious, so Wuming Doji's group of 6 walked slowly. In fact, it was also to take care of Gadotsi. After all, it was rare for them to come into contact with the current crisis, so there was no need to carry Gadotsi as if they were transporting goods. However, they could not be too careless, as the current lineup of 6 people could be seen. Wuming Doji and Karna were in front and behind, while Matthew and Nightingale were guarding Gadotsi in the middle. As for Tamamo Mei, who had been following behind Wuming, she followed by herself. Besides, it would not affect them much, so Wuming acquiesced. However, it seemed that it really did affect them. Along the way, Gadotsi Doji and Matthew kept looking at Wuming strangely, as if they were shy, as if they were praising him, as if they were gratified. In short, it was that kind of strange look that Wuming could not put his finger on. The more Wuming Doji thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong, so he asked Tamamo Mei, "Did you say something strange when you came here and met up with Tachika Doji and the others?" "Lord Celander, you're overthinking it. I merely politely introduced myself as your fiancé to you, master." Tamamo Mei smiled elegantly at Wuming. Wuming Doji finally understood why Gadotsi Doji and Matthew Doji were looking at him in such a way. "But I didn't say that I wanted you to be my fiancé. Forget it. Let's leave it at that for now." Seeing that it was because Tamamo Mei had fought the demon god Shutting, Wuming Doji decided to take a loss and leave their relationship at that for the time being. Hello. Speaking of which, why is Ms. Nightingale here?" Wuming asked Gadotsi and the others behind him. Although Wuming's team of 6 had arranged themselves in a strict manner, Wuming, who was leading the way, and Karna, who was bringing up the rear, were only a few meters away from Gadotsi. Therefore, Wuming didn't need to raise his voice or wait until he was close enough. He could just ask directly. "Oh, you're talking about this problem. Actually, it's like this." Gadotsi smiled and explained to Wuming. After Wuming heard this, he began to have some doubts about luck. That night, Wuming instigated Nightingale to perform an amputation operation on Achilles. Achilles was already fed up with the berserker, so he ran away. Naturally, Nightingale let go of this excellent amputation material and chased after him. The two chased each other on the land southeast of the Missouri River that was not under the influence of Rome and Greece. In this way, Nightingale chased after Achilles for a few days, but in the end, Achilles was more skillful and escaped Nightingale's pursuit. After all, he was a cavalry. Nightingale, on the other hand, could not find her target, so she began to save others along the way. For some reason, ordinary natives, soldiers of the Revolutionary Army and so on were still wandering. Humans were not to be underestimated. Even in an era where the 5 forces were divided, humans could survive on their own. The location of Denver was not so much located in the Rocky Mountains, but more accurately, it was located at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. In other words, the terrain was not high. Coincidentally, Nightingale's original location was south of Riverton and north of Denver. In this way, if she walked a little further south, Nightingale would not be far from Denver. Coincidentally, Shitendaji's poison was a pathogen for Nightingale. After feeling the poison blown away by the explosion between Wuming and Ibaraki Duji's noble artifacts, Nightingale came to Denver with her obsession as a berserker. Since most of the poison in Denver had been blown away, Nightingale was able to find people or things that were more poisonous at the moment. And there was no doubt that Shitendaji was that poison. Then Nightingale came to Gadatsu's side and used her noble artifact to resist Shitendaji's poison. What happened later, Wuming also knew about it. With her obsession as a pathogen, Nightingale as a berserker found Gadatsu just like that. Wuming could only smile and say, "That's really, as expected of a berserker." Chapter 520. Wuming's group didn't waste any more time. In just an hour they arrived at Riverton. This included Karna from the American faction and Tamamonome from the Japanese faction. After all, the two of them were now on the same side, and Wuming didn't think it was a secret that Riverton was a gathering place for followers, so he brought them there. After returning to Riverton, Wuming briefly told Karen and Geronimo about what they had done, including how they were accidentally found by Nightingale, Karna's support, and how Tamamonome had joined Wuming. Of course, when he introduced Tamamonome, he introduced her as a partner. Although Wuming did benefit from Tamamonome, there was no such thing as giving one's body in return for a favor, let alone a man giving his body to a woman. Although Wuming was a bit thick-skinned, he wouldn't do such a shameless thing. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Let's not talk about other things, but with Karna joining us, we are already a lot stronger. After listening to Wuming's explanation, Karna nodded affirmatively. As an existence on the same level as his own disciple, Karna's strength could be said to be the best. Coupled with the memory of the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, Karna was relieved that this once troublesome enemy had become an ally. Sure enough, you also remember the Battle of the Holy Grail. Karna wasn't surprised to see that Karna knew him. Karna didn't think that he was special. Since he could remember the Battle of the 14 Horsemen, then the other followers in the Battle of the 14 Horsemen would certainly remember him. Hearing Karna's words, Karna smiled at Karna to show his friendliness. At this time, Wuming looked around and found that something was wrong. By the way, aren't there some people missing? Wuming looked at the followers in the room. It was obvious that there were some people missing. As for Elizabeth and the others, they ran into a little trouble. It's fine. Gadatsu coughed awkwardly. At this moment, Gadatsu was extremely embarrassed, and Matthew was beside her, looking like he was ready for battle. This made Wuming wonder if Gadatsu had a moral crisis just now. When Wuming told Geronimo and Sharon what happened, Gadatsu was attacked by Kyoheim. After that, Elizabeth, Robin Hood, and Billy Boy threw themselves at Gadatsu and shouted, "Lady and Zhen! Lady and Zhen!" Kyoheim was taken away, and the scene of Gadatsu being tightly protected by Matthew appeared. As if he had thought of something, Wuming no longer asked about it. Then he asked about another person. What about Rama? He won't find trouble with Greece. Other than Elizabeth and a few other servants in the team, Wuming found it strange that Romo the Wounded was not here. After a few days of rest, it was reasonable to say that Rama had almost recovered. Because of this, Rama should be here in such a situation. The only reason why Rama wasn't here was that he had gone to Greece to save his wife. That's right. Although Rama belongs to the ranks of the lone followers, the king is proud and arrogant. From the beginning, he had been searching for Sito alone and did not accept our help. If it weren't for your serious injuries, we wouldn't have met again, Karen explained. And through this lesson the king has also thought it through. He is no longer alone and has decided to join us, Geronimo added. And then he went alone again? Wuming wondered. Wasn't it obvious? Although he decided to go with everyone, in the end he still went to Greece alone. However, Sharon shook his head. This time he was not alone. Achilles went with him. In other words, after Achilles got rid of Nightingale, he returned to Riverton. Then, under Rama's strong desire, he listened to his teacher and accompanied Rama to Greece. Spartacus also went with them. Geronimo added and smiled. Wuming instantly understood Geronimo's smile and felt a little embarrassed. If Geronimo hadn't mentioned it, Wuming would have forgotten about him. Back then he had used the pseudo-heavenly lock to tie Spartacus up and threw him into the woods. It seemed that Spartacus was finally found by Sharon and the others. As for Wuming's pseudo-heavenly lock, it was estimated that its magic power had been exhausted and broken. After all, it had been used for a long time. Without Wuming's magic power to replenish it, it was normal for it to break. Anyway, Wuming did not feel bad about it. After all, he still had a few pseudo-heavenly locks in his spatial relics. Let's not talk about Spartacus for now. If Achilles went with them, I'm relieved. Wu Ming was relieved. He did not want Rama to be killed again. Although Achilles was easily tied up by Wu Ming's trick as a demigod hero, Achilles was not to be underestimated. Not only did he have an almost invincible defense like Karna, but he also had many relics. For example, Achilles' shield alone was enough to block the most powerful relics of Karna and Wu Ming, which were comparable to natural disasters. Of course, although it would break after blocking for a while, it was enough for a battle that could end in a few seconds. Since Rama and the others have gone to Greece, let's work on both sides. Whether it was Sharon, Geronimo, Nightingale, or Karna and Tamamonome, they all understood what Wu Ming meant. Are we going to have a final battle? Gadotsi also understood what Wu Ming meant. She was shocked. That's right. Wu Ming decided to end the mutation of this singularity as soon as possible. With the Celtic forces, the American forces, and the lone follower forces joining forces, and the Japanese forces withdrawing, Wu Ming felt that now was the best time to destroy both Greece and Rome. Wu Ming had always felt that the trap set by the Magician King at this singularity was not that simple. He felt that Shutendaji was not the only one who knew Wu Ming's identity and was targeting Wu Ming. The longer this dragged on, the more Wu Ming felt that something was going to happen. Sharon, Geronimo, what do you think? Wu Ming asked the two of them who were acting as the wise ones. I think we should slow down a little. After all, Rama and the others just left yesterday. They should be in Greece now, Geronimo said calmly. However, Sharon expressed a different opinion. I agree with Salander, but I suggest we only attack one of the forces for now. Chapter 521. Immediately afterward, Sharon began to analyze. And as far as we can see, our three-party cooperation can cause an overwhelming force to one of them, but if we deal with both forces at the same time, we will inevitably be suppressed by both sides. After all, although we have a large number of servants, if we deal with both forces at the same time, we will have to split up. Whether it's Greece or Rome, I don't think I'm a pushover, so I think we are likely to suffer losses. Wu Ming nodded. Sharon was right. If Wu Ming was not included, it could be calculated like this. The leader of the Celts, Maeve, had 3 servants, Finn, Dilmaud, and the unknown Indian servant. Needless to say, Maeve and the other Celtic servants were not weak. Although Silent Wonder had never seen the Indian servant before, he knew that the Celts were quite powerful since they were related to Rama. The American forces only had 3 servants. Needless to say, the leader Edison was very weak, and Helena could only be an auxiliary mage. The two's combat power was not high, only Garna was strong, so they did not dare to act rashly. The leader of the lone servant force could be said to be Gadotsi, and there were a lot of servants: Matthew, Achilles, Sharon, Geronimo, Robin Hood, Billy Boy, Kyoheim, Elizabeth, Spartacus, and Rama. As for Tamamo no Mae, she was temporarily assigned to the lone servant force. Although they had the largest number of servants, there were not many who had strong combat power. Strictly speaking, only Achilles, Sharon, and Rama had first-line combat power, and the rest, whether it was Geronimo, Robin Hood, or even Billy Boy, they were not strong. As for Kyoheim and Elizabeth, well, if they were compared to Wu Ming, Garna, and others, they would be honest mascots. Well, if Kyoheim didn't shout Anjin-sama, and Elizabeth didn't sing, they would become very popular. Tamamo no Mae's words were mentioned before. If she was summoned as a berserker or some other job rank, Tamamo no Mae would be able to unleash the terrifying power of one of the 3 great monsters. But now she was just an ordinary witch fox. Lastly, if Spartacus could release his noble phantasm, he would be a very good troublemaker. However, he would be tied up in a few moves, so he could not be counted on. Moreover, even if he did release a precious artifact, it would be self-destructing and the price would be too great. Didn't you see that Caligula's berserker, who didn't have any powerful abilities, was stabbed by a noble phantasm? Although it was inappropriate to say so, in the face of a top-level servant like Wu Ming was certain that no one present, not even Sharon, would be able to survive if they fought with their lives on the line. Although it seemed like Wu Ming was a little arrogant, unfortunately this was the truth. Karong is right. Since that's the case, let's split into 2 teams. Wu Ming decided to eliminate one of the forces first, and then attack the remaining forces. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming told everyone about his opportunity. They were still divided into 2 teams. The first team was led by Sharon and Geronimo. Robin Hood, Billy Boy, Kyoheim, Elizabeth, plus Edison and Helena, a total of 8 people. Their task was to go to the Roman camp and use all kinds of tricks to distract the Roman forces. The purpose was to delay the Roman forces and have no time to deal with the Greek forces. The Greek forces, on the other hand, were led by Wu Ming and other powerful servants to form the second team to eliminate them. Wu Ming returned to Washington first and then led Maeve, Finn and Dilmad to Greece. Karna, on the other hand, was to join Rama, Achilles, and Spartacus to attack the Greek forces together with the Celtic forces brought by Wu Ming. For now, the Greek forces were much more difficult to deal with than the Roman forces. The Arcadian huntress, the divine magician, and the demigod hero were all stronger than the less mysterious Caesar, Cleopatra, and the others. Because of this, Wu Ming decided to gather powerful forces to eliminate the Greek forces first, and then attack the Roman forces. When Wu Ming and the other servants of the second team attacked the Greek forces, Sharon would lead the first team to entangle the Roman forces. Facing the less mysterious Roman forces, Wu Ming believed that Sharon and the others would not suffer any casualties. After all, they did not have to fight with their lives on the line. They just had to interfere with the Roman forces. That's a good plan. After all, even if we go to Greece with the second team, we won't be able to do much. It's better to go to Rome to interfere. Sharon agreed with the plan. The rest of the servants, Geronimo, Tamamo, and Karna, also had no objections. At this time Gadazzi spoke. But Matthew and I? Gadazzi asked weakly. Matthew also nodded. They could not contact Chaldea at the moment, so Gadazzi and the others could only decide what to do next for the time being. Wu Ming pondered for a moment, then said, Tachika and Matthew, I originally wanted you to go with Sharon, but as the master, I have to ask for your opinion so you can choose which team to follow. After hearing Wu Ming's words, Gadazzi and Matthew looked at each other. But it didn't take long for Gadazzi to speak under Matthew's affirmative gaze. Matthew and I will follow Teacher Ma's team. Then Gadazzi stated her reason. After all, you have to fight for your life. If Matthew and I go, it may cause trouble for you. After all, Matthew is not good at attacking. Let Matthew and I go to Rome to interfere. Gadazzi said to Wu Ming with a smile. Although Gadazzi wanted to go with Wu Ming, she knew that she was a human master, and her servant Matthew was only a defensive type. Following Wu Ming and the others' attack team would inevitably cause trouble. Therefore, Gadazzi suppressed her desire and chose to go with Sharon and the others to Rome. It's really hard for you, Tachika. It's great that you can think like this. Wu Ming said as he touched Gadazzi's little head. Although Wu Ming could also protect Gadazzi, he was always somewhat restrained. Therefore, Wu Ming was really pleased that Gadazzi could choose to follow Sharon to Rome. It's nothing. I think if the doctor and the director were here, they would let me choose a team. Gadazzi smiled slightly, enjoying Wu Ming's touch. Retracting his hand, Wu Ming looked at everyone. Since the task has been assigned, then I will leave first. I will inform Edison to meet you here later. At that time, I will use Edison's communicator to talk to you. Later, Geronimo informed Lisabeth and others of the plan. They naturally had no objection and they were quite excited. Especially after Kyoheim knew that she and Gadazzi were in the same team. In this way, Wu Ming and Karna left together, and everyone was preparing for the upcoming battle. Chapter 522. Wu Ming and Karna left Riverton, but they were not going in the same direction. Karna was heading to the Great Lakes, which was the territory of the Greek forces, to look for Rama and the others. Achilles, Rama, and Spartacus set off during the day. According to Wu Ming's speculation, even if they were there, it was unlikely that they would rush into the Greek followers recklessly. Maybe they were just observing. After all, after this crisis, Rama also found the problem. Recklessness would not only fail to save his wife, but it would also put him in danger. After all, he was a king. Even if he was more impulsive when he was young, Rama was not ignorant. At present, there had been no movement from the Greek side, so Wu Ming judged that they had not made a move yet. This was good. Karna could meet up with them first, then lurk and wait for reinforcements. As for Karna's identity, Wu Ming gave him a Loon runestone, which contained a video recorded by Wu Ming, which was enough to prove Karna's identity. Besides, Achilles had also teamed up with Karna before, when they were 14 knights, so he knew that Karna would not lie. Therefore, Wu Ming was not worried about Karna's identity. In this way, Karna headed toward the northeast. Wu Ming, on the other hand, went south, preparing to use his assassin behavior to pass through the gap between Greece and Rome and return to Celtic. Coincidentally, although it was daytime when Wu Ming and the others attacked Jiro City, it was almost dark when they arrived at Riverton. The night was suitable for Wu Ming to sneak away. However, Wu Ming thought about it carefully and laughed. Not to mention that it would take too long to carefully rush back. Wuming had a portal. Wuming had to rely on himself before because he had never been to those places. Now that he needed to rush back home, wouldn't that be putting the cart before the horse? Therefore, Wuming directly opened the portal and went to Washington. In the president's office in Washington, a black-purple spatial ripple appeared in front of the desk. Then Wuming walked out of the portal. "You're back." Wuming let out a long sigh of relief, giving off the feeling of a wanderer returning home. However, Wuming chuckled self-deprecatingly. The feeling of home could only be felt in the root. After that, Wuming looked around the empty office. The office gave Wuming the feeling that no one had come here after he left. The books on the table were still the same as when Wuming left. "Xiao Sai, you're back." At this moment, the door to the office suddenly opened. The person who called Wuming Little Sai was undoubtedly Maeve. Then Maeve threw herself into Wuming's arms. "I'm sorry, Maeve. I was delayed by something and came back late." Silent Wonder smiled at Maeve. His smile naturally contained an apologetic tone. However, Maeve didn't care. After shaking her head, she broke away from Wuming's embrace. Then Maeve hugged one of Wuming's arms and said with a smile, "It's good that you're back." If there were outsiders here, they would probably be scared to death by Maeve's behavior. Therefore, the cold, arrogant queen who didn't treat men as humans had become so gentle. She was many times gentler than before Wuming left. Even Wuming was shocked. Was it because they hadn't seen each other for a long time that led to the release of mental stress? In layman's terms, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Wuming sat on the president's chair without the slightest bit of guilt. The poor president had already died. Wuming hugged Maeve, who was sitting on his lap, and began to tell her about his experience. Maeve, on the other hand, was listening attentively, her big eyes sparkling. "In other words, as long as we join forces with the American forces and followers to eradicate Greece and Rome, we will win." Maeve smiled sweetly. Wuming nodded. Then he asked Maeve a little strangely, "Maeve, why are you so happy today?" Wuming asked. Since she came in, she had been very gentle until now. She was much gentler than the Maeve from a few days ago. Of course, she was still not as gentle as an ordinary girl, but this was not easy for Maeve. You can't expect a queen to be gentle. This was already a very gentle level for Maeve. Facing Wuming's puzzled question, Maeve hugged Wuming's neck and looked at Wuming's face and said happily, "Because Sai took off her helmet." When Maeve said this, Wuming realized that he didn't wear his helmet anymore. No one knew when it started, but Wuming had taken off his helmet and maintained the appearance of only wearing white armor. Wuming would only close his helmet during the battle, but once the battle was over, he would take it off again. Although Wuming was used to it, Maeve was not. She had never seen Wuming's true face in this singularity. Of course, it didn't mean that Wuming covered his true face to make Maeve suspicious. After all, no matter who it was, if their lover always covered their face with a mask when they were with their other half, the other half would be very depressed if they couldn't see their lover's face. "So, I won't wear a helmet in the future, how about that?" Without apologizing, Wuming asked with a smile. With the relationship between the two, there was no need for an apology. "Yeah, but no matter what, I like Little Sai." Maeve gently leaned in Wuming's arms and enjoyed this moment of peace. Wuming gently patted Maeve's back and enjoyed a moment of peace with Maeve. Sure enough, Maeve is actually just a little girl who lacks love. After a moment of tenderness, Wuming and Maeve left the office. After all, there was no time to lose. It was better to mobilize the troops and start the final battle. "By the way, Sai, that Indian servant left our side." "Left? What happened?" Although leaving a servant was not a big deal for the current situation, Wuming still wanted to know the inside story. "That servant is the hero of India, Achuna. He temporarily joined us on the grounds of following us to find Karna. Soon after he left. Wuming was taken aback. Achuna's mortal enemy was Karna. It seemed that he was still very persistent after death. No wonder he had some relationship with Rama. Rama was the seventh incarnation of Vishnu. Vishnu's sixth incarnation was the axe-wielding Rama, who appeared in the Mahabharata. It had some relationship with Achuna. But more importantly, the axe-wielding Rama was Karna's teacher. Karna's spear was transformed from the axe-wielding Rama's eternal blade. Wuming's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Karna won't meet Achuna halfway, right? Chapter 523. Maeve, gather Finn and the others and head to Chicago. I'll go check on Riverton. I have a feeling that Ajo and Karna have met. When it came to serious matters, Maeve was not ambiguous at all and immediately nodded. Wuming opened a portal and walked in. After Maeve saw Wuming leave, she reverted from a pretty girl to an incomparably domineering queen. She then gave an order to the Wuming guards outside. All troops head to Chicago. Outside Riverton town, a dark purple teleportation gate appeared. Wuming walked out. Although Wuming was going to Riverton, Wuming chose the place where he and Karna had parted. Wuming looked in the direction Karna had left. Lightning and fire kept appearing in the sky there. Wuming immediately took out his communication device and contacted Edison. Even if Karna and Ajo met, they wouldn't be able to determine the winner in a short time. "Hello, this is Thomas Edison." The Lionhead's deep voice came from Wuming's communication device. Listening to Edison's incomparably serious voice, Wuming was amused. Could you imagine a giant lionhead seriously talking on the phone? "I'm Siren, President Edison." Wuming then told Edison to attack this place. Wuming also told Edison that Karna was with him. "Understood. I'll go to Riverton with Lady Helena immediately with the mechanical infantry," Edison said seriously. Edison said solemnly and then hung up the communication device. Wuming smiled helplessly and put the communication device away. Wuming didn't go back to Riverton. Instead he ran toward Karna. East of Riverton in the Missouri River Basin. At this moment two godlike figures were fighting. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several bolts of lightning shot towards the running Karna from the top of a small hill. Bang bang. Karna swung his spear and deflected the lightning arrows. The falling bolts exploded on the ground, creating many craters. Then, Karna condensed mana on his spear and swept it toward the small hill in front of him. Crack. Boom. Like cutting vegetables, the small hill in front of Karna was cut in half and then exploded by the mana contained in it. A dark-skinned figure flew up from the small mound, holding a strange bow in his hands. There was no doubt that the arrow that had attacked Karna was shot by him, and it had to be Ajo. Ajo wasn't worried about losing her cover. In the air, Ajo stood upside down and raised her bow. Though Karna shot a few more arrows. 5 lightning bolts attracted each other and shot toward Karna in the shape of a pentagram. This time, Karna didn't use his gun to knock away the arrows. Instead, he jumped at the moment the pentagon-shaped arrows were shot at him. Boom. The bolts landed on the ground and the ground exploded. The strong wind blew Karna's white hair. Karna stood up and looked at Ajo who had landed on the ground. While Karna was dodging the pentagram arrow, Ajona took advantage of the opportunity to flip over and adjust his position before landing steadily on the ground. Karna and Ajo stood opposite each other in the distance, giving off the feeling that they were about to negotiate. But unfortunately, neither Arzu nor Karna had the intention to speak. Ajo raised his bow and shot at Karna crazily with mana bolts. Karna, on the other hand, sprinted toward Ajo, swinging the indestructible blade in his hand to deflect the arrows. From the moment they met, they hadn't said a word and had been fighting the entire time. The surroundings were full of holes from their battle. It was like a natural disaster. That was what Wuming thought when he arrived. Seeing the two fighting again, Wuming sighed. "That black guy is Ajo?" Wuming asked in surprise. Ajo seemed to have heard him and glanced at Wuming. However, compared to Wuming, Karna seemed to be more attractive to him. Wuming smiled awkwardly. After all, he was caught talking bad about Ajo. However, Wuming didn't expect Ajo to be a black guy. Wuming didn't try to hide his presence. Therefore, not only Ajo but Karna also noticed Wuming when Wuming arrived. However, because he was fighting with Ajo, Karna didn't greet Wuming. Both of them didn't care about the others around them and only cared about each other. While they were fighting, Wuming shook his head and got rid of the thought that Ajo was a black guy. Then, Wuming stretched out his hand and a holy light spear appeared. Mythical Yggdrasil. Whoosh. Along with the sound of a relic being released, Wuming threw out a small but bright light needle. Karna and Ajo, who were in the middle of their battle, naturally discovered the needle of light. Furthermore, they sensed a considerable threat from it and hurriedly retreated. Poof. The light needle disappeared as soon as it pierced the ground, leaving a small but bottomless hole and a sound when it pierced the ground. Wuming learned this move from the Star Cup's consciousness. By condensing the holy spear, although the attack range was reduced, the power was increased. Otherwise, Karna and Ajo wouldn't have dodged in a hurry. Instead, they would have used their weapons to deflect Wuming's light needle. However, the current result was what Wuming wanted. Wuming didn't want the holy spear to turn into a powerful light cannon. This time he only used it to interrupt the battle between Karna and Ajo. Wuming dashed forward and came to Karna's side. Although Karna and Ajo had separated, their eyes were still fixed on each other. This made Wuming wonder if there was some unspeakable gay relationship between the two of them. Can't we not fight? Wuming didn't ask anything else and just asked this question. After all, they were about to start a war with the Greek forces. It would be difficult for them to lose a top fighter like Karna. I'm afraid not. Ajo and I are mortal enemies. I don't want to fight, but it seems that Ajo wants to defeat me. I'm afraid I can't help you. After hearing Karna's words, Wuming looked at Ajo. Wuming saw that Ajo's eyes were filled with strong fighting spirit and an incomparably persistent desire. It was obvious that he wouldn't let Karna go. There were only two ways to deal with Ajo. The first was to let Karna and Ajo fight. After all, if Wuming forcibly took Karna away, Ajo would definitely chase after him. Since Ajo could join the Celtic side because of Karna, it wasn't impossible for him to join the Greek side because of Karna. The Greek side would definitely warmly welcome a powerhouse who only wanted to fight Karna. While Wuming was thinking, Ajo was already impatient. What? You want to fight 2 against 1? Even if that's the case, it doesn't matter. Fight me, Karna. Chapter 524. After Ajo finished speaking, she released her magic in a very imposing manner, causing the surrounding ground to crack. At this moment, Wuming finally had a chance to size up Ajona. Although his skin was dark, it revealed an incomparably healthy luster. Dressed in blue and white Indian Brahmin aristocratic clothes, this dark young man was full of character. Plus, he had a cold expression on his face. Wuming believed that ordinary girls in the modern world would definitely be smitten by Ajona. Wuming looked at Karna as if he had suddenly realized something. Was it because Karna was fairer than Ajona that Ajona was so stubborn about fighting him? I feel like you're thinking about something very rude, Karna said indifferently without even looking at Wuming. You're overthinking it, Wuming replied awkwardly. Of course he was joking. Wuming could understand why Ajona was pestering Karna. They were evenly matched, but because the opponent was in a difficult situation, Ajona, who had once sworn that he would not attack the opponent when the opponent was in a difficult situation, made his move. Even though Ajona's guidance was involved, in the end, Ajona still shot the arrow himself. That was the arrow that ended Karna's life, and also the arrow that would make Ajona suffer for the rest of his life. The hero Ajona had actually wanted to kill his archenemy in a murderous manner. That was too degrading. Although justice always belonged to the victor, Ajona still felt uneasy. Therefore, after turning into a heroic spirit, his wish was to fight Karna and defeat him with his own strength. Wuming had also thought it through. Let Karna and Ajona fight. After all, even if Wuming took Karna away, they would still end up fighting in the end. As for killing Ajona with Karna, Wuming had thought about it before, but first of all, it was inhumane, and second of all, this place was neither close nor far from Chicago. It would cause trouble sooner or later. Then Wuming opened a portal. After exchanging a few words with Karna, Karna nodded. Then he glanced at Ajo and walked in. Karna, don't even think about escaping. Arzu roared angrily. Don't worry, Achuna. Karna only left the Missouri River Basin. He only went to the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. After all, there are few people there. You won't be disturbed. Then Wuming moved the portal and pushed it in front of Ajo. You can find Karna again through this portal. Of course, you can choose not to trust me. The choice is yours. Wuming smiled, indicating that he meant no harm. However, in Ajo's eyes, this smile was extremely evil. He was having a good fight with his opponent, and you sent his opponent running away as soon as you arrived. Now you're even smiling. No matter how you look at it, it's a smile that's asking for a beating. Unfortunately, Wuming's charm wasn't as great as Karna's. Ajo merely looked at Wuming deeply and then entered the portal. Of course, Wuming wouldn't play any tricks. At this moment, Karna and Ajo were indeed in the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. Then Wuming took out his communication device and sent a message to Edison. Karna and Ajo are fighting to the death in the northwest of the Cordillera Mountains. You must avoid that place. Pass through Denver from the south and meet up with Chaldea's master in Riverton. After a while, Edison sent back a message. Putting away the communication device, Wuming took Karna's place and continued running toward Chicago. Let the two of them fight it out. By the time the victor is decided, Silent Wonder would have collected all 4 holy grails. The sun set in the west and night gradually fell. Des Moines, a town on the Mississippi plains that was neither too far nor too close to Chicago. Because of the war, there weren't many people in the town. Also, because the sun had just set, There were only a few passers-by on the road. They all had bitter expressions and frowns. Some of the houses were damaged and some were directly abandoned. No one cared about them. However, because this place was under the influence of Greece, it was relatively peaceful. Suddenly, a green figure flashed past like a shooting star. This made one of the passers-by wonder if he was hallucinating because of his long-term nervousness, or if he had run into a ghost. Although the sun had just set, it was still considered night. Not wanting to think about it anymore, the passers-by quickened his pace and left. In every abandoned house in Des Moines, a red-haired young man stood in a house without any light, looking out the window from time to time. This person was Rama. Following the appearance of a green figure, Achilles appeared in front of Rama. "How is it?" Rama asked. "I found out. Those people have all gathered in Chicago because of a big hole in their spaceship. They haven't moved yet," Achilles said, rather displeased. "Speaking of which, we should just attack them directly. Is there a need to be so cautious?" Even Spartacus, who had been trying to attack Rama for some unknown reason, was released by Rama for being a hindrance. Well, actually, Rama just let him go with the flow. It would be best if he could affect the Greek side. After what happened before, I understand that if I want to take back Xido, I won't be able to do it rashly. I might even be killed. Rama closed his eyes and explained to Achilles. This was also the reason why Rama asked Achilles to scout for information. But why didn't he go himself? Achilles was the fastest to run. "I deserve to die. However, I can't die. I can't let Xido suffer. I must take back Xido. Before that, I must not die." Rama clenched his fist tightly. The metal gauntlet on his arm made a creaking sound because of Rama's strength. It could be seen how turbulent Rama's heart was. As expected, I still don't know anything about love. Can't we just fight our way through the enemy? Achilles pouted and complained. Even so, Achilles still followed Rama's instructions to scout for information. Sharon had told him that Achilles must listen to Rama's instructions and not charge into the enemy's base alone. As a teacher, Sharon naturally had ways to make his disciple obedient. After all, this was the talent of a teacher. After that, Achilles could only grumble helplessly before following Rama over. If that's the case, then what should we do next? Achilles dug his ears and asked Rama. "Attack." Rama paused for a moment and said, "Ha." Achilles suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. Otherwise, there was something wrong with the young king in front of him. Achilles thought, "You must be kidding, brother." Chapter 525. Without paying attention to Achilles' expression, Rama explained the reason. "At present, there is no monkey army to help me. The only servants who can fight are you and me. Therefore, attacking is the most reliable method at present." Rama said sadly. When he thought that Xido might have been killed, Rama's heart was full of uneasiness. The young Rama still had the courage to be foolish. After Rama finished speaking, Achilles' forehead showed the word V. "Isn't that the same as my previous proposal?" Achilles thought with a broken heart. Suddenly a voice came. "I think you'd better wait a little bit." "Who is it?" Whether it was Achilles or Rama, they took out their weapons and were vigilant. "Don't be nervous." Then, accompanied by an optical camouflage illusion, Wu Ming's figure appeared in a corner of the dim room. Wu Ming said that the technology of the Mecha clan was still useful. "It's you?" Achilles was quite upset, then he put down his meteor lance. "The Celtic Saint King?" Rama was surprised, but after seeing that it was Wu Ming, he calmed down. After knowing that Wu Ming was also a king, although it was a pirated version, Rama's impression of Wu Ming became very good. Of course, a good impression was a good impression, and the fact that Wu Ming injured him could be forgiven. However, Rama still remembered the crime of negligently allowing his men to imprison Xido. Although they reconciled, they still had to remember the grudge. This was the young King Rama's decision in the face of Xido's matter. Rama, who was like a child throwing a tantrum, was not noble. As long as it concerned Xido, then Rama would not give in. "Why did you come here alone? Where is the master of Chaldea?" After all, he was also Rama's savior, so Rama naturally cared about him. "Don't worry, Edison has agreed to join forces with us. On the way back, we have joined forces with Karna to eliminate the Shitendaji who had gathered in Japan." Then Wu Ming briefly explained to the two of them why Karna was a member of the United States, what they had been doing during this period of time, and their next plan. "I didn't expect Lancer to join Edison's camp. Life is really unpredictable." Achilles sighed. In the previous memory they were clearly teammates, but in the end they became enemies again. But in any case, because of the alliance, they became teammates again. That person is a hero who gave alms. It's not strange for him to have such decisiveness, Rama said calmly. Although he and Karna did not come from the same story, Rama knew quite a bit about the hero who gave alms. But I didn't expect the heaven-bestowed hero Ajo to appear at this singularity. Rama shook his head. Because of Wu Ming's explanation, the two also knew that Ajona had been fighting Karna all this time. They both sighed with emotion. Not only did Rama temporarily lose a combat power, but he also sighed that these two old enemies who loved and hated each other could appear at this singularity at the same time. That's why this is the Holy Grail. Such a miracle can also happen. Achilles smiled softly, thinking about how he and Sensei appeared together. After hearing Achilles' words, Wu Ming smiled. Because of this, Rama, you can also meet Sito at this singularity just like Karna and Ajo. These were all miracles brought about by the Holy Grail. Rama did not deny it at all and nodded seriously. Although I still can't meet Sito, as long as I know that she's still on this continent, I feel extremely at ease. Because Rama intervened in the battle of the monkeys and killed the enemy monkey, the dead monkey's wife put a curse on him. Even if you take back your wife, you can't really meet her. Because of this parting curse, Rama and Sito were separated again in the end, and it was a separation of life and death. This curse still accompanied the two. As long as they were too close to each other, one of them would gradually become weak, faint, and lose power until one of them left. Even if there's a curse, I will definitely find Sito, Rama said angrily. Even with such a curse, Rama still pursued Sito without hesitation, even if it meant death. If that's the case, then you should listen to me and wait for a while. During Wu Ming's explanation, he also told the two of them about the joint attack of the American forces, the lone follower forces, and the Celtic forces on the remaining two forces. If that's the case, I can wait. Anyway, I've been waiting for a day. Rama put away the eternal blade and sat cross-legged on the ground. Tisk, really, both of them are so difficult to understand. Achilles complained as he walked to another room. Wu Ming smiled helplessly, although he asked Romodi, "By the way, why didn't I see Spartacus?" Wu Ming found Rama and Achilles through mana perception, but Wu Ming didn't find Spartacus' mana in the surroundings. Could it be that he was already killed? Wu Ming thought mischievously. That traitor, I have already banished him. Rama answered Wu Ming rather unhappily. Banished? Could it be that Spartacus was attracted by the king follower and attacked Rama, but was then driven away by Rama? Wu Ming looked at Rama's rather unhappy expression and thought that it must be so. Forget it, I'll go find him. I don't want him to ruin my plan. After that, Rama and Achilles continued to stay in Des Moines, while Wu Ming left and embarked on the path to find the traitor. Although Spartacus' dexterity was D, even so he was much faster than ordinary people. Therefore he must hurry up and find him. If he was discovered or even captured by the Greek forces. Although it wouldn't cause a big impact, he was afraid that he would be used against Wu Ming and the others. First of all, Wu Ming looked for traces of Spartacus near Chicago. Of course, Wu Ming activated the Triumph armor and the assassin mode, so it wasn't easy to find him. Then he found some traces of Spartacus. Could it be that he was really captured? Wu Ming said helplessly. At this time, Wu Ming suddenly found another mana, which was the mana of someone Wu Ming had seen before. Does this mean that he wants me to go there? Wu Ming felt that the other party didn't have the slightest trace of concealment. He speculated that the other party was trying to attract him. Not afraid that it was a trap, Wu Ming quietly moved toward that place. Chapter 526. In just a few seconds, Wu Ming came to a small high ground where a girl with beast ears holding a bow stood there. She seemed to be admiring the moon. After Wu Ming saw the girl with beast ears, he also let go of the unnecessary vigilance in his heart, lifted the magic version of optical camouflage, and slowly walked out of the shadows. Since it's you, I don't think this is a trap, Atlanta. After Wu Ming finished speaking, the girl with beast ears turned around. This person was the famous huntress of Greece, Atlanta. You really believe me? You know I'm a huntress, Saber. Without looking back, Atlanta just closed her eyes and said in a flat tone. Since you call me Saber, then you must have the memory of the battle of the 14 horsemen. I don't think you will repay kindness with ingratitude. Wu Ming chuckled. Indeed, the only saber that Wu Ming had ever served as was Sodric during the battle of the 14 horsemen, which also showed that Atlanta had that memory. And because Wu Ming freed Black Assassin Jack the Ripper, Atlanta owed Wu Ming a favor. It could be said that when the Argo encountered Wu Ming before, Atlanta pretended not to know Wu Ming and did not expose Wu Ming's information, which was considered as returning the favor. However, it did not mean that there was no friendship between the two after the favor was returned. And now, Atlanta contacted Wu Ming, which was the embodiment of this friendship. If you call me over like this, won't it attract Aisen's attention? Although I don't know him, I don't think that guy is very generous. Wu Ming walked to Atlanta's side and looked at the moon side by side. Although Aisen is indeed a useless guy, it is because of this that he will trust me completely and send me out to search the surroundings alone. However, it was also because Atlanta was suitable for investigation that Aisen sent her here. So, in other words, Spartacus was really caught by you. Otherwise, why would he send Atlanta to scout for no reason? Wu Ming really didn't know Aisen, but through historical records in Wu Ming's opinion with Aisen's timid temperament, he should keep all his combat power by his side. Unless there was a special situation. And Wu Ming didn't think that Atlanta was sent by Aisen. It was Demetrius who spoke to Aisen, so Aisen sent me out. Sure enough. Wu Ming nodded and then continued to ask. So, tell me the specific information about the Greek side. Immediately afterward, Atlanta briefly told Wu Ming about the servants on the Greek side. The leader of the Greek side, or rather the person who obtained the Holy Grail, was Aisen. Therefore the search Argo was Aisen's precious artifact. The other servants on the Greek side were Archer Atlanta, Caster Medea, Berserker Hercules, Lancer Hector, and the captive archer Xido. That guy seemed to have told Aisen that as long as he defeated the other forces and seized all 4 Holy Grails, he would be able to establish a country on this land that was separate from human history and would not be burned down by reason. Then, like a fanatic, Aisen began to fight for hegemony, Atlanta said with a disdainful look on her face. He didn't know if she was mocking the Magic King or mocking Aisen for believing the Magic King who had cheated him so easily. I really don't know what Aisen is thinking. Back at the second singularity, he was already tricked by the Magus King. Even though it was with the help of Demetrius. Wu Ming didn't know about this and Atlanta didn't care whether Aisen was deceived or not, so they stopped talking about this topic. Well, I have understood the specific situation. So, why did you capture Xido? How could you threaten Rama with this? Isn't it a bit ridiculous? Rama might be controlled by others, but it was impossible for him to completely surrender to Aisen. Moreover, Xido could take the initiative to die for the people when Rama was old. Perhaps when Aisen threatened Rama with this, Xido would choose to commit suicide. In short, it was impossible. That guy did have such an idea. Atlanta said helplessly and disdainfully. Oh, I overestimated Aisen. Wu Ming also smiled, but his smile was quite sarcastic. However, you can completely leave Aisen's side. Why did you choose to stay? After all, there were not only Greek forces on the mainland. Wu Ming did not think that Atlanta would stubbornly follow Aisen's side. Atlanta was not a good person, but in the face of righteousness she would not choose to follow Aisen's side. Indeed, when I was in Oceanos I left Aisen's Argo, but this time is slightly different. Atlanta shook her head. As a person who once participated in the Argo, when I was summoned by Aisen using the Holy Grail, I was bound to his Argo. I can't leave this side. To put it simply, there was a master who didn't have a command seal. But this is not the whole reason. The main point is that Aisen has a way to summon the demon god pillar. Wu Ming frowned. Shitendaji, who held the Holy Grail, also summoned the demon god pillar. Could it be that servants with the Holy Grail could summon the demon god pillar? Then, could Maeve, who held the original Holy Grail of this singularity, also be able to, using the Holy Grail, you can use a servant's spiritual base to summon a demon god pillar, but the summoned demon god pillar is more like a possession than a summon. Atlanta continued. Possession? That is to say, the demon god pillar needs to devour a servant to be able to descend? Wu Ming remembered the Judge Haim who appeared when he defeated the demon god Shitendaji. He was afraid that the other party used the Judge Haim's spiritual base to summon the demon god pillar. Wu Ming's guess was right. Shitendaji used the unconscious Judge Haim as a medium to summon the demon god pillar. Because he used the Judge Haim's spiritual base, Shitendaji did not lose consciousness. She used the Holy Grail to split her consciousness in advance, and with the death of the main body as a trigger medium, she used the Judge Haim to summon the demon god pillar, and then fused a trace of consciousness in the Holy Grail with the demon god pillar. This was also the reason why the demon god Shitendaji made the sound of the demon god pillar in Shitendaji. Then Aisen captured Sito. This is also the reason why Aisen captured Sito. If Sito can't make Roromo submit, then it means that he is useless. Naturally, he can use Cedo to summon the demon god pillar. Atlanta's eyes were evil, as if she was ashamed to be in the same force as Ison. This is the most important reason why I didn't break away from the Greek forces. Chapter 527. Compared to breaking away from Greece, isn't it more suitable for you to lurk as an undercover agent? Wuming said for Atlanta. Atlanta nodded and then continued. Because I don't know how to be an undercover agent, I can be regarded as working for Ison wholeheartedly during this time, whether it's capturing Cedo or obeying orders to kill other servants. That was also the reason why Atlanta did not hesitate to place a noble phantasm on Wuming. Since the Argo was destroyed by your shot, Ison has been keeping the Argo in Chicago for the past few days and embedded the Holy Grail in it. With Demetrius' help, the Argo has become a grade A+ noble phantasm. It's more than enough to withstand the attack of a grade A noble phantasm. Wuming smiled when he heard this. He was afraid that Ison was frightened by Wuming's shot, so he installed the Holy Grail directly on the Argo. However, because the Holy Grail was transferred from Chicago to the Argo, the Dragon Teeth soldiers could not be automatically mass-produced. These days, the Dragon Teeth soldiers were made by Demetrius herself. Not only the quality but also the quantity has decreased a lot. In several battles with Rome, we can be said to be at a disadvantage. Wuming suddenly realized that the Holy Grail still had a lot of drawbacks. It could not mass-produce soldiers on the Argo. But because of this, Ison let me, Hector, and Hercules go to the battlefield together. We killed Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. At present, there are not many Roman servants left. Hearing this, Wuming's eyes lit up. This can be regarded as reducing the burden on us. Immediately afterward, Wuming told Atlanta about their plan to unite the three parties. I didn't expect you to be able to do this. Atlanta looked at Wuming deeply. Becoming the king of the Celts, destroying the Japanese forces, joining the American forces, and attacking Greece and Rome with the lone servant forces led by Master Chaldea. This really shocked Atlanta. If everything goes well, I'm afraid this singularity will be the fastest to solve among these singularities, Atlanta said thoughtfully. Atlanta herself had appeared at the second singularity before, so she naturally knew how quickly Gadazzi had saved the singularity. Based on this, he speculated that the other singularities should be similar. Indeed. Counting from the time Li Xiang and the others entered this singularity, I'm afraid it hasn't even been a week. Although Wuming did not know how long it took Gadazzi to solve the previous singularities, Roman had told Wuming that it had been more than half a year since the anthropogenic fever. In other words, on average, it would take more than a month and a half to deal with a singularity. If all went well, Gadazzi would be able to resolve the singularity in less than a week. That was quite fast. While Wuming was thinking, Atalanta paused and spoke. By the way, is it okay to tell me about your chances? Atlanta meant nothing more than, in case I'm a spy and deceived you, or accidentally leak your information. However, Wuming chuckled and shook his head. It doesn't matter even if you are exposed. After all, our plan is considered an open conspiracy. Gadazzi and the others' first team went to Rome. They did not expect to eradicate Rome, but it was enough to hold them back. Wuming and the others' second team would attack the Greek forces head-on. Before the attack, the Greek side would definitely notice something, so it did not matter if they were exposed or not. What's more, I don't think Atlanta is that kind of person. I believe that Atlanta, who loves children, no matter how her appearance changes, her inner heart is incomparably beautiful. With that said, Wuming reached out and touched Atlanta's beast ears. Because the distance was too close, Atlanta did not dodge and was caught by Wuming. Aha! Atlanta was shocked and quickly jumped away. What are you doing, you rude guy? Atlanta blushed, hugged her beast ears and stammered. Sorry, I've been interested in your beast ears for a long time. It was just a spur of the moment. Wuming apologized with a smile, but the hand that was still floating in the air showed that Wuming was still thinking about the touch of Atlanta's beast ears. Atlanta blushed, gritted her teeth and gripped the sky bow fiercely. Ahem, I have one more thing to ask of you. Wuming coughed and became serious. And it seemed that because Wuming had left a good impression on Atlanta, such a simple teasing was not enough to completely collapse the image built in Atlanta's heart. Atlanta touched the beast ears on her head, calmed her face and nodded. But it was still very popular. Immediately afterward, Wuming made 2 runestones on the spot in front of Atlanta, but the runes on the runestones did not look like Lune runes. Immediately afterward, Wuming handed the 2 runestones to Atlanta. Hide these 2 runestones close to your body. Don't let Demetrius, the god magician, find them. After all, Kanagami magicians weren't the same as those weak magicians of modern times. Seeing Wu Ming's solemn face, she quickly took it and nodded solemnly. Then, because of the physical contact when she took the runestones, Atlanta blushed again. Even the night could not cover it. After all, there was moonlight. And with a pretentious, serious expression, Atlanta was very cute at the moment. However, Wu Ming also knew that it was business, so he did not tease Atlanta anymore. When Ison wants to use the Holy Grail to summon the demon god pillar, just pour your mana into these 2 runic stones. If possible, the closer you are to the Holy Grail, the better. Of course, I won't force you. Wu Ming instructed in a joking manner. I know. If there is nothing else, I will leave first. After Wu Ming nodded, Atlanta took 2 steps, but for some reason she stopped again. By the way, Demetrius may have become the master of Spartacus. You know his noble phantasm. That self-explosion is not a joke. After all, Wu Ming and Atlanta both had memories of the battle between the 14 knights. Naturally, they remembered the power of Spartacus' noble phantasm during the battle between the 14 knights. Are you concerned about me? Why don't you let me touch your beast ears again? Wu Ming smiled mischievously. Atlanta's face turned red in an instant, and she quickly left here. After Atlanta left, Wu Ming's mischievous smile disappeared. Looking at the gradually rising moon, Wu Ming always felt uneasy. At this time, Wu Ming found that something was wrong. The sky is not normal. Chapter 528. People said that waiting was the longest, but it was not the case for the servants. After putting away the communication device with Edison, Wu Ming went to the window and looked at the moon. At that moment, the moon had reached the western sky. It should be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Edison told me that they have met up with Tachika and the others and set off for Rome. Wu Ming said to the shadow behind him. Rama and Achilles came out from the shadow. Finally, it's going to start fighting. It's very uncomfortable to be here all the time. Achilles bit the bristle grass that he found from God knows where. I'm just as upset as you are. As long as I think about fighting side by side with the Celtic servants, my heart is extremely irritated. Rama put one hand on the eternal blade on his waist, and the other hand clenched his fist. Wu Ming knew what Rama meant. The enemy who imprisoned his wife was now going to rescue his wife with the enemy. Rama's heart must be quite restless. After all, Rama and Wu Ming had reconciled, but he did not reconcile with the other Celtic servants. It could be said that if it were not for Wu Ming's repeated advice and a hint of pleading, Rama, the childish king, would definitely not agree. This time I'm giving you face. Remember this, humph. Rama snorted and turned his head. I think you're doing this for the sake of saving your wife. Of course, that sentence could only be thought. Wu Ming did not dare to say it out loud. Otherwise, who knew what kind of trouble this young king would cause? So, when will the Celtic servants arrive here? Achilles asked. Wu Ming smiled slightly. They have arrived. The moon was covered by clouds and the earth fell into darkness. On the eastern plains outside Chicago, a large shadow moved toward Chicago with the help of the darkness. Atlanta stood on the city wall, her eyes focused. Even the moonless night could not cover the sharp eyes of the huntress. Celtic people? Atlanta said softly as if deep in thought. She then jumped, left the city wall and returned to the city of Chicago. Without a doubt, she had gone to inform Ison. It's time for me to come out. Defending the city is my specialty. After Atlanta left, a middle-aged man carrying a javelin that was much longer than an ordinary javelin walked to the city wall. Gradually, a gust of wind blew, and the dark clouds in the sky that were blocking the moon were blown away. The moonlight illuminated the land. Countless soldiers with the same face advanced towards the city of Chicago in an orderly manner. Even Hector couldn't tell how many soldiers they had. The only 2 things that stood out from the rest were the 3 servants with weapons in their hands at the front of the army and the luxurious ox cart pulled by 2 divine bulls in the middle of the army. I didn't expect Queen Maeve to personally come to the battlefield. Hector scratched the back of his head, seemingly feeling helpless about the situation. Even though Greece had always been at war with Rome, it did not mean that they had never fought with the Celts. In fact, what Wu Ming didn't know was that whether it was the Celts, Greeks or Romans, they had killed or injured each other. However, because it was only a battle between a single servant, the information was not circulated. Of course, from a general point of view, some information that was not so secret was still known. For example, the leader of the Celts was Maeve, because she never deliberately hid herself and even publicized it. Therefore, Hector concluded that Maeve must be sitting in the luxurious ox cart. For a woman like Maeve who thought highly of herself, it was natural for her to do such a thing. Of course, Hector didn't know Wu Ming's information. Not to mention that Wu Ming was summoned less than a week ago, Maeve didn't deliberately publicize it. Of course, this was Wu Ming's idea. Then those two spearmen must be Celtic warriors. Ah, how valiant. They didn't let a single dragon fangs go and quickly ambushed here. I wouldn't do something like that. Hector smiled bitterly as he spoke faintly. Just like what Hector said, Greece's territory was full of dragon fang soldiers, and the Celts were able to sneak into Chicago in the middle of the night without being discovered. This was undoubtedly due to the help of the servants. I really hope it's as simple as defending the city. Uncle is very clumsy about other things. After sighing, Hector began to command the Dragonfang soldiers to prepare for the enemy's attack. Not far from Chicago, Finn waved his hand, and the entire army stopped in place as if they had received an order. This was the privilege of the Holy Grail's generals. Now the enemy must have discovered us. The next command will be handed over to the Queen Dilmund. Finn said lightly. Yes, my lord, I will go and greet the Queen. Dilmund bowed to Finn and then walked to the rear. Just as Dilmund said, he was ready to welcome the Queen's carriage. To be able to let the army arrive here without being discovered, your wisdom is really terrifying. Next, it's time to show my bravery. Fergus grinned. Finn had a good impression of this big guy. Well, after all, they were both Celts. Then I'll have to trouble the magic sword envoy to take the lead. In just a moment, the ox cart came from the center of the army to the front line. Ah, we're here already, Finn. Good job. A noblewoman's voice came from the carriage pulled by the divine ox. Our army has arrived in Chicago, and the enemy has discovered us. So, when will His Royal Highness the Holy King appear? Finn asked politely. Your Holy King is on the other side of the city. I can feel it. In the carriage, Maeve took off her white silk gloves and looked at the bright red dragon-like pattern on the back of her hand formed by 3 command seals and smiled. Then let's have Fergus break the city gate. No problem, right? Maeve said to Fergus outside the carriage. Of course, no problem. How can a Celtic man say no? After saying that, Fergus walked forward with the magic sword spiral sword on his shoulder. After the Holy Grail's treatment, Fergus had completely recovered, and now he was full of energy. On the city wall, Hector looked at the man walking forward with the magic sword. He had already guessed what he was going to do. He's going to attack the city with a noble artifact. What a headache. Then, when Hector noticed that Fergus' noble artifact was getting brighter and the magic power was getting thicker, Hector retreated. Uncle, you can't stop it. This is already a noble artifact that's comparable to a city's noble artifact. Let's escape first. Then a rainbow-colored light exploded after Hector left the city wall. Chapter 529. Alright, I feel like I'm full of energy today. I'm sure you'll be satisfied with this shot. Fergus raised his neon sword and laughed. One had to know that the AN+ and A+ were not eye-catching individually, but when they were combined it was no joke. Then hurry up. If it wasn't for your relic, I would have asked you to leave earlier. Maeve's impatient voice came from the carriage. Naturally, by leaving the stage he meant that he had died. Also, although I don't mind you taking advantage of me verbally, I would be happy to see little Sai kill you. All my apologies, Your Majesty. Don't worry, I'm sure His Majesty will be satisfied with this shot. I hope so. Maeve's lazy voice sounded. The neon sword in Fergus's hand began to glow. Fergus stabbed the neon sword into the ground. Khalid Balk. In an instant, a rainbow-colored light extended from the neon sword to the city walls of Chicago. Boom. In an instant, a rainbow light burst out of the ground and blasted the city walls of Chicago. Countless Dragonfang soldiers were directly destroyed and turned into dust. Those Dragonfang soldiers that were lucky enough not to be turned into dust were also scattered into small pieces of bone. Ah, this is truly spectacular. Fergus laughed heartily as he raised the rainbow sword. It had to be said that Fergus was really full of energy. After releasing the relic that doubled his power, he was still in high spirits. Finn and Dilmund watched this scene calmly. After all, this scene was nothing to them. Maeve, who was sitting in her beloved chariot, nodded in satisfaction. Then she gave an order. Everyone attack. At this moment, an irrational roar was heard. ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** On the west side of Chicago, which was the opposite side of Maeve's army, Wuming, Rama, and Achilles arrived. When the three of them arrived, they saw the explosion on the east side of Chicago. "That's the demonic sword envoy's precious artifact," Rama said. "The person who understands a person the best is not his friend but his opponent." Back then, Rama had fought Fergus to the death for the sake of Ceto. Naturally, he knew about Fergus' noble artifact. That should be the case. Fergus' noble artifact was still vivid in Rama's mind. "To be honest, I originally wanted to end that guy directly." At this moment, Wuming spoke. Both Rama and Achilles looked over. "If there are no restrictions, he will do as he pleases. For a king, this kind of teammate is very annoying." Wuming smiled coldly. At this moment, Rama and Achilles finally felt the pressure brought about by Wuming. No matter how kind this guy was, he was still a berserker. No matter how close he was to the people, he was still a king. All in all, Wuming was not a kind man. He would not hesitate to do things that would bring him enough benefits. However, Wuming still had his own bottom line. As the origin dragon, Wuming would definitely become 10,000 times more noble than Gaia Alea in the future. He was destined to never be the same as an ordinary person, which was why he treated everything with reason. That was why people often said that the heavens were heartless. Moreover, have you ever seen Wuming hesitate or worry when he killed someone? Although it was a pity, why would a human feel sad when he crushed an ant to death? That was the reality. Take Nazalik for example. The people in it were all demons. If it was not for Wuming deliberately suppressing them, they would have been destroyed. However, Wuming would still not do anything to them. Firstly, they were Wuming's subordinates. Wuming had mistakenly entered and became the supreme king. Therefore, he had to be responsible. Secondly, if there was good, there would be evil. Wuming would not purposely punish the evil. Cough cough. However, if they provoked Wuming, Wuming would not mind getting rid of the weeds. Just like Darius who wanted to capture Mayu. Other than that, Wuming was more fond of humans. Because Wuming was just adopted by humans, he was a human for a period of time. Therefore, he was more fond of humans. Especially those who were considered good by Wuming. If he had the ability, Wuming would definitely help. Rick was a good example. Wuming specially went to Rick's world and helped the humans to turn the situation around. If possible, Wuming still liked to stay with humans. Because the possibilities and emotions of humans made Wuming very happy. And Wuming wanted to kill Fergus. Well, regarding this point, Wuming only wanted to kill Fergus because he had flirted with Maeve before. But no matter what, he is still my subordinate. It is better to keep him alive. Just like that, the topic ended. Let's go. Maeve has already started. We can't fall behind. Saying that, the three of them walked towards the west wall of Chicago. Wuming started to move. On Maeve's side, there was a small problem. Hercules let out a confused roar as he swung his axe and sword at Fergus. Bang! The ground that was hit by Hercules cracked. As for Fergus, he naturally dodged this attack. Hey, why are you attacking me directly? You think too highly of me. Although Fergus was still running his mouth, his expression had become serious. Fergus was also holding the neon sword with both hands. Dilmund, be careful. This big guy is not to be trifled with. Finn held his spear and looked warily at Hercules, who had pulled out his axe and sword from the ground. Yes, my lord. Dilmund also raised his red and yellow spears and stood beside Finn. My brave warriors. Maeve didn't even walk out of the carriage. With just one sentence, countless Wuming-faced soldiers rushed towards Hercules. However, even if they were strengthened by the Holy Grail, the small fries were still small fries. For a great hero like Hercules, they were basically useless. Hercules roared at the sky. Even if he didn't have magic to release this skill, the roar mixed with magic alone was enough to shock the nearby soldiers to death. Then, Hercules rushed into the crowd of soldiers and began a massacre. At this moment, Hercules could only be described with 4 words. Unparalleled mowing. Ha! Accompanied by a roar, a drill-like spiral sword attacked Hercules from behind. Clang! Hercules easily blocked Fergus' attack with his axe and sword and slapped Fergus away. With the mind's eye skill, Hercules naturally wouldn't be ambushed successfully. This is a little tricky. Fergus stabilized himself as he flew away and broke out in cold sweat. When Fergus was sent flying, Finn and Dilmund also rushed forward. With the two of them together and their flexibility as spearmen, they could slightly restrain Hercules. However, they still couldn't cause much damage to Hercules. Let's release the noble artifact again. With that, Fergus raised his magic sword. However, at this moment, a rather deranged voice was heard. Ah, oppressor. Oppressor. Chapter 530. In the west of Chicago, because Maeve was attracting attention in the east of Chicago, Wu Ming's side was relatively smooth. Nay, Achilles stopped his chariot, and the 3 immortal horses that pulled the chariot snorted. On the city wall there was no one, all of them were Dragon Fang soldiers. Now these Dragon Fang soldiers had all fallen to the ground and turned into ashes. Even my chariot can't stop them. Sure enough, the small fries are not interesting. There was no doubt that these were all done by Achilles, who had just stopped the chariot. Besides, Achilles also descended as a rider. Achilles' chariot was still too strong for these Dragon Fang soldiers, or rather, the Dragon Fang soldiers were too weak. What's more, these Dragon Fang soldiers were likely to be made by Demetrius, not the enhanced version of the Dragon Fang soldiers mass-produced by the Holy Grail. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming and Rama got off the chariot. The two finally experienced the thrill of racing an ancient chariot. At this time, an arrow emitting turquoise magic power shot over. Bang! Rama held the indestructible blade and deflected the arrow with A-level strength. The 3 of them looked at the roof of the house not far away, and Atalanta was aiming her bow here. That is, big sister. Achilles' expression darkened. After all, when he was in the 14th rider, he had a good relationship with Atalanta, and Achilles didn't really want to attack Atalanta. Oh really, why are there so many people tonight? I don't have the energy to entertain you all. A voice that was more boring than Roman came. Hector, carrying his long javelin, appeared from the shadows of the city. Hector. This was Achilles' second surprise after Atalanta. He didn't expect it to be someone related to him. In the famous Trojan War, Hector's defense was invincible, and the enemy was defeated. The Trojan side was not far from victory. After that, Achilles went to the battlefield to fight Hector one-on-one. Although Hector broke his immortality, Hector still lost. As a result, the Trojan side gradually lost. It could be said that if there was no Achilles, Hector would not die, and he would not fall into the Trojan horse trap, and the Trojan side would probably win. But there were no ifs, and now the 2 old rivals of the Trojan War were reunited here. Isn't this Achilles? I didn't think that we would become enemies again. Sure enough, the Holy Grail is really a magical thing. Hector didn't think that he would be able to see Achilles, and he was also shocked. I'll deal with this guy. Achilles said to Wu Ming and Rama riding on his meteor chariot. Said chariot, but said chariot, 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 he said chariot, and said he said although said. Although Hector did not think that Atalanta could defeat the remaining 2 servants, he did not think that she would be able to defeat them. In Hector's opinion, the remaining 2 servants were not weaker than Achilles. However, Archer Atalanta just nodded indifferently and did not say anything. After Hector left, Rama pointed the undying blade at Atalanta. Then let me deal with this archer, Romo said confidently. Wu Ming knew that after the mana crystal healed Rama, a huge amount of mana was still stored in Rama's body. Just like how Fergus had an excess of energy after being healed by the Holy Grail, Rama was the same now. Then, under Rama's eager expression, Atalanta put down the bow. Sarand Ison is preparing to escape. Then 2 gasps of surprise came from Wu Ming and Romo. Sigh. The southern city of the Missouri River Valley, Alexandria, camp of the Roman forces. Romulus looked at the Roman soldiers who were fighting against the incoming mechanical troops with a serious face and did not say anything. Lord God. A blonde girl in a white wedding dress walked to Romulus' side. It seems that the masters of Chaldea have joined forces with the native forces of the United States. Very good, in this way Rome will be protected. Romulus nodded and said excitedly. However, Nero did not understand what his god was talking about. My sons, Caesar, Caligula, have left. Now all of our servants, Rome, have left. Romulus said to the pure bride, who asked Rome to summon emperors this time. How mysterious would the emperors be? It was expected that they would leave. I will protect Rome until I die. The girl said to the god ancestor in a tone of farewell. My son, if I, Rome, also leave, then destroy the Holy Grail. Romulus said. But God, isn't that the existence that is suppressing her? If we destroy the Holy Grail, won't she be released? The girl said worriedly. Compared to becoming the demon god pillar, Rome, think that we should choose to release her. As he said that, Romulus put his hand on the girl's head. If Rome is gone, there is no need to stop her. Moreover, she is also on our side, my son Nero. I understand, Lord God. Then they realized that instead of attacking, the mechanical troops seem to be trapping them here. It seems that something we don't know has happened, my son. My son welcomed them in. In the west of Chicago, the battle between Achilles and Hector caused a lot of magic to explode. It was as bright as the light in the night. However, Wuming and Romulus did not pay attention to that. In short, that archer is actually on our side. Romulus looked at Atlanta, who left, and asked Wuming rather unhappily. He wanted to fight for a long time. In the end, he finally met an enemy that he thought he could fight, but it turned out to be a spy on his side. In short, it's a good thing to subdue the enemy without fighting. Wuming smiled and patted Romulus on the shoulder, indicating that he was more open-minded. Of course, I understand that. Romulus said unhappily. Then next we need to wait, right? Wuming walked to the edge of the city wall and said jokingly. We can also watch Achilles fight Hector to relieve our boredom. Wuming showed a mischievous smile. Romulus was speechless. Chapter 531. Ah! Oppressor. Spartacus laughed wildly and used his seemingly ordinary iron sword to madly charge into the crowd of soldiers. At this moment, Maeve had already retreated to the back of the soldiers, or it should be said that the soldiers were constantly moving forward. Maeve, who hadn't moved, fell behind the soldiers. If one paid close attention, they would discover that Spartacus was advancing towards Maeve. If Wuming was here, it wouldn't be strange. After all, Spartacus liked to attack the so-called oppressors that he spoke of the most. In other words, it was normal for him to attack Maeve. I can't let you pass, Berserker. At this moment, a tall man with a spiral sword stood in front of Spartacus. It was Fergus, who had been sent flying by Hercules. Because Finn and Dillman had gone to restrain Hercules, Fergus was the only one facing this mad dog. Why didn't Maeve make a move? If the Emperor had to make a move, then what was the use of a general? Are you also an oppressor? Haha, oppressor, give me more oppression. Spartacus laughed loudly, no longer caring about the other soldiers, and charged towards Fergus. Although it was very short, Fergus had been a king before, so it wasn't strange that he could attract Fergus' attention. Clank! The magic sword and the ordinary iron sword collided, producing an ear-piercing sound. It was hard to imagine that Spartacus's ordinary iron sword could not break after colliding with the magic sword. Ah! Ah! Spartacus was like a mad dog as he punched Fergus without any pattern. Fergus was a Celtic warrior, a member of the Red Branch Knights, and also wielded a magic sword. Naturally, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage in a fight against the leader of the rebels, Spartacus. If one only looked at his appearance, Spartacus was about to be killed by Fergus. However, Fergus discovered that even if Spartacus' body was seriously injured, this berserker was getting more spirited as he fought. No, it should be said that, the more injured he gets, the more spirited he gets. Tiske, I hate this kind of guy with super high durability. Fergus was rather unhappy. Spartacus' body was already injured. His right arm was almost detached from his body, and there was a big hole in his abdomen and heart by the neon sword. There were many half-meter-long wounds on his body, and even half of his head was smashed in. The wounds on Spartacus' head and heart were the wounds. When Fergus saw that Spartacus was getting more spirited, he directly attacked these two places. However, Fergus didn't affect Spartacus. Fergus even noticed that Spartacus's wounds were healing, and Spartacus mutated. Spartacus, whose body had begun to change, gradually blocked Fergus' attacks and began to counterattack. Berserker can't be killed, Fergus was. Fergus took a few steps back and was ready to use his noble relic to kill Berserker in one go. Ah! Oppressor. Come, give me even more pressure. However, Spartacus didn't give Fergus a chance. He was really like a mad dog entangling with Fergus. In the face of a berserker like Spartacus, who had so many crazy skills, pure magic and physical attacks were basically useless against Spartacus. This was all thanks to Spartacus' noble phantasm and skills. The glory of being abused. B+ when the magician healed Spartacus, the amount of magic consumed was a quarter of the original amount. The more serious the attack, the more spirited Spartacus was until he brought out all his hidden strength. After a certain period of time, the injuries would be gradually healed. Unyielding will, no matter what kind of pain and despair he faced, he would not give in. An extremely strong will could obtain physical and mental endurance. Roar of the defective beast, crying warmonger. A part of the damage received from the enemy can be converted into magic and stored in the body. The efficiency of the conversion of magic will increase as Spartacus' physical strength decreases. The magic accumulated in the body can be used to enhance Spartacus' ability. It could be said that Spartacus was on the same level as Hercules in terms of tenacity. Of course, it was only in terms of tenacity. Currently, there were only two ways to deal with Spartacus. The first way was to wait for Spartacus' noble phantasm to activate and self-destruct. The second method was to use the instant kill ability of the demon eyes of death perception to directly ignore everything and kill Spartacus. Of course, if one had the ability to directly destroy Spartacus' body, it could be said that he was killed instantly. Currently, Spartacus had not accumulated enough magic to self-destruct. However, Fergus had a noble phantasm that was enough to destroy 3 mountains. However, Fergus did not know about this. Moreover, his noble phantasm might not be able to kill Spartacus instantly. Fergus wanted to release his noble phantasm, but at the moment, Fergus was trapped by Spartacus, who was changing rapidly. In terms of attributes, other than Spartacus' durability being higher than Fergus, the rest of Spartacus' ability points were either the same or lower than Fergus. Coincidentally, Spartacus' agility was 2 levels lower than Fergus. Fergus also discovered this in the following battle with Spartacus. Therefore, after a few rounds of fighting with Spartacus, he used his skills to trip Spartacus and get behind him. Then he took the opportunity to distance himself from Spartacus. Oppressor. Spartacus got up from the ground and shook his head. He then found Fergus, who was not far behind him. Then Spartacus excitedly raised his iron sword and rushed towards Fergus. Spiral, get ready. Fergus calmly raised his neon sword as he looked at Spartacus, who was running towards him. Fergus shook his head helplessly as he looked at Spartacus, who was 5 meters tall and had accumulated mana due to his injuries. It's my misfortune to be able to meet you. Indeed, as an enemy, Spartacus was an incomparable headache because he couldn't be killed by ordinary means. Well, even as an ally he was a headache. All in all, Fergus had had enough. He wanted to end this berserker completely. Fergus focused all his mana into the neon sword and even began to overdraw his spiritual base. After all, Fergus' mana was E. Fergus was afraid that he could not kill this thing. Taste the real neon sword. Just like Ibaraki Duji's noble phantasm, the neon sword emitted its last colorful light. Even Hercules, Finn and Dillman stopped fighting. Maeve, who was at the back of the army, did the same. The 4 of them turned their attention to Fergus and Spartacus. Oppressor, oh? The light covered the ground. Chapter 532. Boom. The sound of a nuclear explosion came from the east of Chicago, and the storm raged. Wuming and Rama both stabilized their bodies and squinted at the scene filled with sand and dust. After Atlanta left, Wuming and Rama did not really go to watch the classic duel between Achilles and Hector. Instead, they ran along the edge of Chicago toward the Celtic army in the east of the city. In the end, before they could even reach the Celtic army, a violent explosion occurred. The power of the explosion was so great that it even completely destroyed the east wall of Chicago, giving people the feeling that there were no walls in the east of Chicago. Of course, whether it was Denver, Alexandria, or Chicago, there were no such things like ancient walls. All of them were built by various forces during this period of time. Wuming and Rama looked at each other, and the two quickly ran forward. Because of the strong hurricane caused by the big explosion, there was basically no sand and dust around, so the scene could be said to be clear to Wuming and Rama at a glance. In front of the two of them was a huge crater of nearly 100 square kilometers, but because it was too big they could only estimate, but it was definitely more than 50 square kilometers. The depth of the crater was needless to say. The distance between the deepest part of the crater and the ground was about 50 meters, and maybe it was even deeper. Wuming thought that if such a crater fell on Earth, humans would probably end up like the dinosaurs. The ground on the edge of the crater was unusually smooth, and there were no impurities. It was completely the product of the downward compression of the soil by the explosion. In the center of the crater there was a lake full of water, and the lake water was still rising. East of Chicago was Lake Michigan. At this moment, such a big explosion directly connected this huge crater to Lake Michigan. There were no traces of soldiers or servants on the scene, and Wuming's perception was temporarily disabled. There was no doubt that the army brought by Maeve was directly blown into ashes by the explosion. As for the servants who were fighting here, they were probably in danger. Wuming frowned. He was a little worried about Maeve. Even if the servants were killed, they would just retreat to the martyr's palace. However, Wuming was still worried. Because the air here was full of chaotic magic, Wuming's perception was also disturbed by these chaotic magic. It was not that he could not perceive anything, but the difficulty of perception was greatly increased. This terrible explosion, which powerful servant's noble phantasm is it? Rama said with lingering fear. Even he did not have the confidence to say that he could survive the explosion that covered an area of nearly 100 square kilometers. After all, a servant was much stronger than an ordinary person, but without a defensive noble phantasm or skills, they would also directly leave. If he did not have the golden armor, he would have to use of his noble phantasm, to survive. Of course, if Rama released his noble phantasm, he would be able to survive. Even if he did not die, he would be dead, at least he would be dead. All in all, if that was really the case, Rama would definitely not feel good. After Rama finished speaking, Wuming sighed. I'm afraid that except for Maeve, all the servants present have left. After all, this explosion was in the Celtic army. Not to mention that the army was completely wiped out, Wuming still could not find any servants. As for why Wuming knew that Maeve was fine, it was because Wuming was worried about her. Wuming's master was Maeve, so naturally, there was a contractual connection between them. Wuming naturally knew whether Maeve had left or not. Previously, by relying on this connection, Wuming knew that Maeve had come to Chicago. Suddenly Rama said, "What is that?" Rama pointed to the lake below the giant pit that was still rising. Wuming followed Rama's gaze. In the middle of the lake, a large rock that was emitting red light floated up. However, Wuming always felt that the stone with red light was so familiar. Oh my God, that was not a stone with red light. It was clearly Hercules who was activating the 12 trials, God Hand. It was said that Spartacus was difficult to deal with, but compared to Hercules, it was simply insignificant. Hercules' 12 trials, God Hand, could be said to be a real resurrection. Even if his head was chopped off or his whole body was crushed, as long as the noble phantasm was activated, Hercules' whole body would be like steel that was just out of the furnace, emitting red light and began to reconstruct his body. Not to mention, it would also increase the resistance of the cause of death. Hercules was the real difficult to deal with. Wuming fought for a whole day to retrieve Hercules' Berserker class card. In Winterwood City, the new 7 Knights and the Dark King Arthur had to work together to kill Hercules. From this, one could see how tenacious Hercules was. Fortunately, Hercules was a berserker. Otherwise, if Hercules knew how to use his brain, it would be a disaster. In an instant, Wuming flew up and rushed to Hercules, who was still recovering his body. Rama did not stop Wuming. In Rama's opinion, facing an enemy, one should be ruthless, not to mention that this was a servant from Greece. However, this would disappoint Rama. Wuming would not waste his effort to kill Hercules. Not to mention how difficult it was to kill him. Moreover, now was not the time to waste on him. The reason why Wuming rushed to Hercules was to trap him. Wuming arrived above Hercules. Along with the crisp sound of chains, several pseudo-heavenly locks were taken out by Wuming and tied to Hercules. Heavenly locks targeted servants with divinity, and Hercules' divinity was as high as a class. However, Wuming was very clear about one thing. Even if heavenly locks could only trap Hercules for a short time, heavenly locks were only able to suppress Hercules. The stronger the divinity, the tighter the heavenly locks would be. However, Hercules' strength was as high as A+. In Wuming's opinion, Hercules was fully capable of breaking the heavenly locks. In that case, let alone these pseudo-heavenly locks. However, Wuming was only holding on to the idea of stalling for time. Subsequently, Wuming took out a lot of pseudo-heavenly locks that were stored in his noble phantasm. He only left one pseudo-heavenly lock and tied the rest to Hercules. In this case, it would take a long time to use only his strength. Wuming looked at the chain mummy in front of him and nodded as if he was very satisfied with his work of art. Subsequently, Wuming buried Hercules in the huge pit, which could be said to be the bottom of the lake. After that, Wuming and Rama looked for Maeve. Well, first of all, they had to ignore Rama's gaze. Chapter 533. Wuming searched along the edge of the crater and soon found Maeve. After all, Wu Ming could feel from the contract that Maeve was not hurt at all. That meant that she was not in the range of the explosion just now. At the very least she was not hurt. Naturally she was outside the crater. With Wu Ming and Rama's acceleration, it was easy for them to go from the edge of the crater to the other side. It only took them a few minutes. At that moment, the celestial bull that was pulling Maeve's carriage had fallen to the ground. It seemed that it was affected by the explosion. The carriage that was originally gorgeous and dignified had become a little tattered. However, at least it did not seem to be damaged internally. Rama came to the front of the celestial bull and squatted down to check on the two celestial bulls. Wu Ming was slightly stunned when he saw that. Then he recalled something. It seemed like Rama was quite a caring big boy. At that moment, Maeve suddenly flew out of the carriage. That's right. She flew out and landed in Wu Ming's arms. Wu Ming wondered how Maeve could fly into Wu Ming's arms in a straight line. Wouldn't you fall because of gravity? Newton was about to cry. In short, Wu Ming hugged Maeve who was flying toward him. Little Sai, you're finally here. You almost couldn't see me. Maeve looked at Wu Ming pitifully. Of course, if Maeve changed her smile into a cry, the effect would be better. This must be your wife, Cylinder. I'm really envious. Romo stood up and looked at the couple who were hugging each other lovingly. He was filled with emotion. Rama was naturally envious of the couple who could be together. It was unlike him and Sito who could not see each other because of the curse. However, Wu Ming was very helpless. How could you tell that this was a loving hug? It was obviously my Fu who suddenly flew out and I subconsciously hugged her, okay? However, since he had accepted Maeve, a hug was nothing. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Speaking of which, Maeve, what's going on here? Wu Ming asked. On the other hand, Rama was all ears. After all, such a huge explosion was very attractive. This is what happened. Maeve began to tell the story. After Fergus broke the city gate, Hector left while Hercules appeared. Finn and Dilmaud held Hercules back. However, Spartacus appeared and Fergus and Spartacus went against each other. Maeve, of course, was to watch the battle. Following that, there was no progress in the battle between Hercules, Finn, and Dilmaud. It was just a back-and-forth exchange of blows. Although Finn and Dilmaud couldn't defeat Hercules in a one-on-one fight, the two of them were able to fight Hercules to a draw for the time being. As for the battle between Fergus and Spartacus, it was a one-sided battle. Wu Ming felt that something was wrong. He knew the effect of Spartacus' noble phantasm. Soon after, Fergus saw that Spartacus was getting more and more spirited as he fought. Spartacus had transformed into a 5-meter-tall monster. Moreover, he was still transforming into a monster. Fergus decided to activate his relic immediately. Then Spartacus exploded. Wu Ming shook his head bitterly. As expected, nothing good ever came out of this guy's capture. Rama tilted his head awkwardly. It was his fault. However, the young Rama king would never admit his mistake. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. As Maeve was the furthest away and had the protection of the ox cart, she was not hurt. However, the two divine bulls were in trouble. These two divine bulls were not Achilles' immortal horses. Now, all their bones were broken and they were about to leave the stage. Fortunately, it was a noble phantasm, so they did not have to worry too much about it. After Wu Ming and Rama arrived, Maeve removed the noble phantasm. The divine bulls and the ox cart turned into mana particles and disappeared. Is Berserker's noble phantasm that powerful? Rama asked. It was normal for a powerful heroic spirit to have a powerful noble phantasm. However, Spartacus was just a rebellious gladiator. To put it bluntly, he was just a rebellious slave. Moreover, he was a slave who did not succeed in his rebellion and was quickly executed. No matter how one looked at it, such a person should not have such a powerful noble phantasm. He might be an exception. However, I've seen his noble phantasm before. Even if it exploded, it wouldn't be this powerful. Wu Ming put Maeve down from his arms, ignoring her dissatisfied expression. Then Wu Ming looked at the lake behind him that was about to be filled. However, with Master's 3 command incantations and Fergus' noble artifact charging Spartacus, it's not hard to imagine how much damage it could cause. Although almost 100 square kilometers was huge, if Karna and Wu Ming were to fight, thousands of square kilometers of land could be affected. That was also the reason why Wu Ming had asked Karna and Zhou to fight in the northwest part of the Cordillera Mountains. There were fewer people there and it was far away from the battlefield. Otherwise they would be affected by the battle. Command spells? Noble phantasm charging? Rama and Maeve repeated Wu Ming's words. That's right. Wu Ming nodded his head. Spartacus' noble phantasm, crashing warmonger, is a permanent noble phantasm. It can convert the damage it receives into mana and store it in its body. It can increase its ability value and change its body. Finally, when the mana is full, it will self-destruct and launch a destructive impact. After explaining, Wuming paused and thought for a while. I think Demetrius must have used the command incantation to give the command to unleash the greatest power of the Noble Phantasm 3 times. It strengthened Spartacus' Noble Phantasm. In addition to Fergus' continuous attacks and the overcharging of Spartacus' Noble Phantasm, it caused Spartacus to reach the critical point and self-destruct before it could transform into a monster. Rama and Maeve thought for a while and realized that this was the most suitable explanation for the current situation. However, I think Fergus' Noble Phantasm had a huge impact on the situation here. Maeve smiled. What do you mean? Wuming asked. Maeve then told Wuming about the neon sword that seemed to have been infused with all its power. Does that mean it's the same as Ibaraki Duji? Wuming touched his chin. It seems like they've all left the battlefield. Needless to say, Fergus was the closest to Spartacus and was designated to leave the battlefield. As for Finn, Dilmund, and even Hercules, they had spent a lot of time repairing their bodies. It was likely that the 2 of them had also been forced out of the battlefield during the explosion. Don't we need to care about Hercules? Rama asked. He knew that Wuming did not kill Hercules. He only tied Hercules up and buried him. Don't worry about that guy for now. He's no different from leaving the battlefield. Wuming waved his hand. After all, it was not easy for Hercules to break free from the pseudo-skylock that was almost the same as the real skylock. Just when Wuming was about to check on Achilles, a dark purple ripple suddenly appeared. Chapter 534. The portal has been activated? Wuming was shocked. That's right, this was Wuming's portal. There's no time to explain. Come in quickly. Wuming said as he rushed into the portal. That's right, he rushed in. It was obvious how anxious Wuming was. Romo seemed to have thought of something and quickly rushed in as well. Maeve looked at the 2 of them rushing in. She blinked her eyes and walked in gracefully. Then the portal closed. After passing through the portal and arriving on the other side, Maeve found herself in the belly of a ship. Then a rather strange scene appeared before Maeve's eyes. Wuming was holding the Holy Grail in one hand and a spear in the other. He placed the spear on the neck of a yellow-haired guy whose face was pale with fright. Next to the yellow-haired guy was a girl with pinkish-purple hair. She was holding a magic wand with a nervous expression. The beast-eared girl with green hair was aiming an arrow at the girl's head. If the girl with the magic wand made any strange movements, Maeve believed that the beast-eared girl's arrow would definitely pierce through her head. Behind Wuming was Romo. However, at this moment, Romo was holding a girl who looked almost exactly like him. Rama's face was filled with nervousness as he kept calling out names like, Sito, Sito. However, from the looks of it, Romo seemed to be unable to see the girl at all. He was like a blind person who could only rely on touch. However, from the looks of it, there seemed to be a problem with Romo's perception. Although on the surface Romo could accurately touch Sito, at this moment Romo gave off the feeling that he was touching air. As for the girl who seemed to be called Sito, she was already unconscious. This made my Fu daydream. If that girl was me, would Xiao Sai be as anxious as she is? This was a girl's heart. However, Wuming was not paying attention to Maeve at the moment and did not know what she was thinking. Wuming was only paying attention to the yellow-haired guy. In any case, you're someone who entered the martyr's palace. Can't you have a little backbone? With that, Wuming rubbed the tip of his spear on Isen's neck. However, Wuming's result was Isen's howl. Squeak, squeak. Isen's face turned pale and his hands were still trembling. Don't kill me, Isen said in a trembling voice. Looking at Isen in such a state, Medea, or Lily looked at Isen with worry and disappointment. Sir Isen. After seeing such a traitorous witch, Wuming finally understood why Medea, who was abandoned by Isen, would choose to follow him again. Because Medea was in the form of a girl's dream of a girl. Wuming shook his head. A guy like that was not worth his time. However, Wuming still did not lower the tip of his spear from Isen's neck. Then Wuming turned to look at Rama. Rama, can't you sense Sito? Wuming frowned. Although he had learned about the so-called curse from Rama, he did not expect the curse to be so powerful. Now, not to mention not being able to see, even the contact between the 2 of them and even their own perception had become erroneous. This curse of never being together was not just for show. He did not know how a female monkey could place such a curse on Rama and Sito. That's right. Even if Sito and I were to hug each other, we would not be able to see or sense each other. Rama no longer referred to himself as you. At this moment, Rama was like a person who was chasing after hope. In the end, he realized that the hope was despair. Once Sito and I get too close, one of our powers and presence will gradually fade until they leave. Tears rolled down Rama's cheeks. As for which party would disappear, there was no doubt that it would be the weaker party. Wuming recalled the scene when he came back through the portal released by Atlanta. At that time, Sito was not restrained by any chains. However, there was no guarantee that Medea's magic did not restrict her. However, even so, Sito could not stand up at that time as if she was severely injured. At that time, Wuming sensed that Sito's magic power was insufficient, or rather, it was severely lacking. At this moment, looking at the many injuries on Sito's body, as well as the faintly discernible signs of his spirit base disappearing, how could Wu Ming not know what was going on? From being imprisoned on Alcatraz Island to this Argo, until now, Sito had been in a state of abuse. That we did not do anything to Miss Sito. Please believe us. Lord Ison only wanted to use Miss Sito as a hostage, Medea said weakly. If that was the case, the injuries on Sito's body were caused before he was captured on Argo. It was not unreasonable. It was common for the Celts to beat people half to death when they captured them, and they did not have the habit of healing their captives. In other words, Beowulf did not know how to heal at all, and he did not realize that he should heal Sito. In short, that guy was dead. Let's not care about him. Then Wuming felt that something was wrong. Medea was the disciple of the goddess of magic Hecate. She had many healing methods, so why didn't she heal Sito? However, Medea seemed to have seen through Wuming's question and answered it in advance. Miss Sito has always refused me to heal her, and she said something like, even if I die, I don't want to be a burden to Lord Rama. As if recalling the scene when Sito said those words, Medea was a little depressed. She also wanted to sacrifice herself for the people she loved like Sito did, but Ison. While Medea was distracted, Wuming frowned in distress. However, he began to laugh bitterly in his heart. So, if the other party did not want to heal, wouldn't you forcefully heal her? How gentle are you? However, if I didn't see wrongly, Ison wanted to use Sito and the Holy Grail to summon the demon god Pillar. Wuming narrowed his eyes and looked at Ison, who was so frightened that he could not speak. When Wuming said those words, Rama instantly raised his head with anger in his eyes. Rama was slower than Wuming by a bit. When he arrived, Wuming had already seized the Holy Grail and restrained Ison and Medea with Atlanta. It was also Rama's arrival that caused the extremely weak Sito to fall into a coma. Following Wuming's instructions, Rama stumbled and found Sito through Sito's position that was left in his eyes. However, it did not work. Rama could not see Sito at all, nor could he touch Sito. However, he did not give up and kept calling out Sito's name. How could a man who loved his wife not be enraged when he found out that his wife had almost been used as a sacrifice? Bang! Chapter 535. Bang! Wuming moved his spear away from Ison's neck and blocked Rama's indestructible blade. Under the blade of the indestructible blade was Ison, who was paralyzed on the ground. However, Demetrius, who made a little movement, was stopped by Atlanta's arrows. Calm down, Rama. Wuming tried to persuade Rama gently. You want me to calm down? The guy who almost turned Sito into a demon god Pillar is right in front of me. How can I calm down? Rama's eyes were burning with flames as he stared at Ison fiercely as if he wanted to eat Ison alive. We are friends, right? So listen to my advice. Ison is still useful, so don't kill him for the time being. Otherwise, Wuming, who had already snatched the Greek Holy Grail, would have already made his move. Rama looked at Wuming and nodded. He then continued to stare at Ison fiercely. Maeve, please do me a favor. Wuming waved at Maeve, who looked like she was watching a family drama. Yes. Maeve smiled and came to Wuming's side. After that, Wuming took out a lot of healing potions from his precious artifact space. He then opened the teleportation door and let Maeve bring Sito away for the time being. After all, if Sito stayed with Rama any longer, he would disappear soon. After Wuming told Maeve about various things, Maeve carried Sito into the teleportation door. Thank you very much, Holy King. No, surrender. Rama said sincerely to Wuming. It was an eye-opener for Wuming to be able to make the proud and arrogant Rama, who often threw tantrums, apologize so sincerely. Since you are able to call me by my name, it means that we are friends, right? As he spoke, Wu-Ming placed the Holy Grail into the golden ripple under Aisen's gaze. He then extended his hand to Rama. Although Wu-Ming treated Rama as a friend when Reeve shook hands with Rama, he did not expect that. "Yes, that's right, my friend." Then Rama and Wu-Ming held each other's hands tightly. "Then don't attack Aisen for the time being, alright?" Wu-Ming glanced at Aisen, causing Aisen to shuffle backwards in fright. After all, Aisen was currently sitting on the ground. Sure. After all, this person had saved his wife, Sidwa. Moreover, this person was also his friend. Thus, Rama would naturally listen to him. As Rama spoke, he glared at Aisen and no longer looked at him. Otherwise, the anger in his heart would not dissipate. Although Rama had promised Wu-Ming to spare Aisen's life for the time being, he wasn't the kind of person who would forgive someone who almost sacrificed his wife. It was also because of Wu-Ming's face. Otherwise, even if Gadatsi was here with Rama's childish temper, he would have used the indestructible blade to slash Aisen. Yes, the kind that even their own mother wouldn't be able to recognize. "So, Aisen, now you are our captive." Wu-Ming smiled and narrowed his eyes, which made Aisen and even Demetrius feel a chill. In the sky, the Argo was moving towards Alexandria. On the Argo, Aisen was controlling the Argo alone at the helm. If one didn't look at Aisen's livid face and Atlanta behind him, who was holding the heavenly bow and staring at Aisen as if he was her prey, then Aisen's situation was not that bad. Demetrius, who was originally following Aisen, was at the bow with Wu-Ming and Rama, explaining the current situation of the Greek side. In short, after sending out Hercules, Hector and the captive Spartacus, we only have Aisen, Atlanta and me left. Wu-Ming did not look at Demetrius. He just looked ahead as if he was experiencing the feeling of flying in a boat. As for Rama, he sat cross-legged alone on the deck behind Wu-Ming and Demetrius with his eyes closed, as if everything had nothing to do with him until they reached their destination, Alexandria. This was Wu-Ming's purpose. Through Aisen, he drove the Argo to Gadatsi and others' gathering place, Alexandria. At this moment, only Rome was left on this continent, and it was now being restrained by Gadatsi and others. This time, the battle against Greece was also messed up because of Spartacus' self-destruction. Although Finn, Dilmund and Fergus had all left the stage, Silent Noise had taken the opportunity to imprison Hercules. She had also captured Aisen and Demetrius, so overall it was still a good outcome. As for Achilles and Hector, Wu-Ming did not disturb them, just like he did not disturb Karna and Ajo. Now, as long as he got the Holy Grail of Rome, this singularity would be over. With that in mind, Wu-Ming let out a long sigh as he looked at the clouds in the sky. At this moment, because Wu-Ming and Rama did not reply, Demetrius waited there. Because waiting was boring, Demetrius would look at Aisen from time to time, but every time, she would turn her head away in an instant. She was very nervous. She should be afraid of being misunderstood by Wu-Ming and Rama. However, how could Wu-Ming and Rama not notice it? Ahem. I already know the specific situation. Wu-Ming clenched his fist and put it on his mouth and coughed. This scared little Midea so much that she trembled and almost cried. "Don't worry, I won't do anything to Aisen." Wu-Ming shook his head helplessly, trying to calm Demetrius down. But, you cast such a vicious curse on Sir Aisen." As she spoke, Demetrius looked like she was about to cry. "Isn't it obvious?" Wu-Ming said with a bitter smile. "I don't believe that Aisen will be obedient. After all, he's a hero who can leave his name in the martyr's palace. Although Aisen was weak, at least he was invincible when it came to piloting a ship. It could be seen from the fact that Wu-Ming did not feel the slightest tremor when he stood at the bow of the ship. Moreover, the existence that could be chosen by the two great restraints and dragged into the martyr's palace, regardless of whether it was a hero or an anti-hero, would definitely not be the same as ordinary people. Wu-Ming could not be sure if Aisen would betray him or do something else when Wu-Ming and the others attacked Rome. Therefore, Wu-Ming planted a lot of complicated Lune Rune tactics in Aisen's body. Then he told Demetrius and Aisen that as long as Wu-Ming willed it, Aisen would experience what it meant to be in a living hell. Because what he said was true, Aisen and Demetrius believed him. Moreover, when Wu-Ming planted those complicated Lune Rune tactics, Demetrius was beside him. No matter how much Aisen cried and howled, Aisen, who was being held down by Rama, had his body implanted with those tactics in front of Demetrius, who was being watched by Atlanta. However, Wu-Ming did not know anything about curses, nor did he study them. So what he said was a complete lie. However, no matter who saw those extremely complicated and mysterious Lune Rune tactics, they would not doubt Wu-Ming's words. In the eyes of others, it was an extremely vicious curse. As long as you are obedient, nothing will happen. Wu Ming looked at Demetrius with a smile. Demetrius could only nod helplessly. After all, they could not defeat Wu Ming and the others. Chapter 536. Since Rama used him as a laborer, Aisen's sailing speed was still very fast. Wu Ming estimated that it would only take about 10 minutes to reach Alexandria. That. Demetrius, who had been staying beside Wu Ming, spoke hesitantly. What's wrong? Wu Ming looked at Demetrius and asked. Just tell me what you want to know. There's no need to beat around the bush. After that, Demetrius took a deep breath and asked the question. Excuse me, the purplish black hole just now, was it a teleportation magic? Wu Ming was stunned for a moment before he realized what she meant. The purplish black hole that Demetrius was referring to was undoubtedly the teleportation door that Wu Ming came to the Argo. That's a magic trick that I learned from the other world. It's called gate. Gate? Demetrius repeated the word as she pondered. The effect is that based on the place that I've been to or the place that I've seen, I can create a teleportation door anywhere. Wu Ming briefly explained how to use the gate. Anywhere? Demetrius was obviously shocked. Pay attention to the premise. It must be a place that I've been to or the place that I've seen. Wu Ming knocked Demetrius's little head. This scene was extremely similar to a teacher scolding a disobedient student. Well, but even so, it's still very powerful. Demetrius exclaimed as she hugged her little head and cried. Then, are there any side effects or other disadvantages? Demetrius raised her little hand. At this moment, she was also super interested in magic. There are no side effects at all. Well, if there's a disadvantage, it's that it can't be instantly teleported. Wu Ming looked at Demetrius with a perfect smile. At this moment, Demetrius's little head was filled with question marks. After all, you have to open the teleportation door first and then walk in. If you use this trick in a direct battle, it would definitely be useless. Also, if you use this skill in battle, if you can't close it in time, the enemy can also go through the portal. After all, Demetrius could only teleport by herself. That way she would not be able to bring the enemy along with her. You're exaggerating. Even if that's the case, the magic you've learned from the other world is already very powerful. As long as you've been to a place before, or even a place as far as your eyes can see, it's really a powerful magic trick. Demetrius was slightly dazed. Indeed, this otherworld's magic is indeed very powerful. Either it's impossible to use it at all, but once you learn it, not only is the mana consumption low, but you can also move many people. It's much more useful than ordinary spatial magic. That's amazing. Medea said enviously. Do you want to learn? Wu Ming suddenly asked when he saw the envious look on Medea's face. Is it really possible? Demetrius shouted excitedly. Of course. You're not Aisen. I have a good impression of you. Wu Ming was right. Such a naive little princess, because Aisen went to the palace of the beauty goddess to make a wish, she fell in love with Aisen and her life was ruined. Regarding this, Wu Ming naturally did not mind teaching her the portal. Of course, the prerequisite was that Demetrius could learn it. But, we're still enemies. Demetrius began to hesitate. It has to be said that even if she had the reputation of a traitor, which, the current Demetrius was undoubtedly an obedient and sensible princess. Because of the hostile relationship between the two of them, she was worried about whether Wu Ming teaching her magic tricks would be inappropriate. She was really a cute little princess. With the current situation, do you think we can still be considered enemies? Wu Ming teased. Indeed. Now we're captives. Demetrius smiled awkwardly. Then, are you willing to learn this magic trick from me, Demetrius? Wu Ming looked at Demetrius with great respect. Yes, I'm willing, teacher. Demetrius gripped her staff tightly with a serious expression. At this moment, Aisen seemed to have been removed from Demetrius's mind. Demetrius only wanted to learn the portal magic trick. Then let us begin. Immediately after, a strange scene appeared on the deck. Wu Ming and Demetrius stood facing each other with their eyes closed. Wu Ming's hand was placed on Demetrius's head. Both of them did not move at all. This piqued Rama's interest. My friend, what are you doing? However, Wu Ming did not immediately answer Rama. After a moment, Wu Ming opened his eyes and put down his hand on Demetrius's head. It's just a simple memory-sharing magic trick. After all, it's more efficient this way. Alright, actually it was Wu Ming who did not know how to teach. Even he himself used the game scroll to learn the portal magic trick. However, it was not impossible to reverse the process. However, Wu Ming had never thought of teaching anyone and no one had asked Wu Ming. Therefore, Wu Ming did not research on how to teach others the portal magic trick. After reading the nameless spellbook for a period of time, Wu Ming did not look at it anymore. It was fine as long as they could use it. Moreover, Wu Ming did not dare to guarantee that people from other worlds could learn the magic trick of the game Yggdrasil. Wu Ming also chose to teach Demetrius this magic trick because she was a little girl who was passionate about magic. Without any ambiguity, Wu Ming and Demetrius' relationship was only that of a teacher and a student. Rama did not say anything else. After all, he did not know much about magic and was not very interested in it. Therefore, he walked to the bow of the ship and looked at the scenery. As for Wu Ming, he looked at Demetrius who still had her eyes closed. At that moment, Wu Ming's heart was filled with anticipation. Could the magic trick of the game Yggdrasil be learned by the miraculous hero spirit of this world? Wu Ming was very curious. After about 10 seconds, Demetrius opened her eyes. Her eyes were as beautiful as gemstones. His eyes were brimming with excitement and joy. The result was obvious. From the looks of it, you should have learned teleportation gate, right, Demetrius? Wu Ming smiled at Demetrius, pleased. Yes, teacher. I have successfully learned this magic trick. Demetrius shouted excitedly like a small animal. Thank you very much, teacher. Demetrius bowed deeply to Wu Ming to express her gratitude. For Demetrius, who was very interested in magic, being able to learn the magic trick of another world was a great favor. Just as Wu Ming wanted to say something, Rama, who was at the bow of the ship, spoke. What? Chapter 537. My friend, come and see that? Romo said to Wu Ming while pointing in a certain direction. Wu Ming, who reacted, felt that he didn't need to look because the chilling magic power had been transmitted to him. But even so, Wu Ming continued to shift his gaze in the direction that Romo was pointing at. This place was a few kilometers north of Alexandria City. It could be said that they had not completely arrived at Alexandria City. At the location of Alexandria City, a behemoth appeared at this moment. A huge meat pillar that reached the sky, countless eyes that were constantly twisting, and a huge magic power that belonged to the demon god. Demon god pillar. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes. There was no doubt that it was the demon god pillar summoned by the Holy Grail of Rome. Could it be that Sharon and the others had forced Rome into a corner? Otherwise, why would the other party casually summon the demon god pillar? Or could it be that Rome's forces were already on the verge of collapse? If that was the case, it was not unimaginable that they would be forced to sacrifice the demon god pillar. Wu Ming pondered. But this has confirmed that Rome was indeed defeated by Greece. At this moment, the Argo suddenly stopped. Wu Ming turned to look at Ison, who was at the helm. However, at this moment Ison was squatting on the ground with his head in his hands. Even when Atlanta pointed her bow at him, he did not get up. With a sudden jump, Wu Ming came to the helm. What's going on? This guy suddenly doesn't dare to go forward anymore. Atlanta stared at Ison with disgust. Ison, on the other hand, ignored Atlanta's angry glare, as if he would rather die with his corpse intact. Ison, it seems that you know what that is. Wu Ming looked at Ison with interest. Of course I know. That's the demon god pillar. If we go there, we'll just be throwing our lives away. Moreover, we won't even have a complete corpse. I don't want to go there. Ison's face was pale, but he still shouted loudly at Wu Ming. Indeed, although Wu Ming basically cut down the demon god pillars like vegetables, that was only because Wu Ming's authority was powerful. Basically, every time Wu Ming got rid of a demon god pillar, he would use his authority. After all, demon gods were still gods. The authority obtained from killing gods was especially effective against demon gods. However, even if the demon god pillar was frequently destroyed by Wu Ming, it was undeniable that the demon god pillar possessed the supreme power of a demon god. It could be said that ordinary servants or even first-class servants could not defeat a demon god pillar, and the same was true for some of the top servants. Of course, unless one had a special relic or skill, only those who had reached Karna's level would be able to fight against the demon god pillars. As for the servants who were currently in Alexandria, even if Sharon was there was nothing they could do. Wu Ming suddenly thought of someone. If it's that vampire, he might have the power to defeat the demon god pillar. Although Pamilia was a monster and classified as an anti-hero, it was undeniable that the vampire had her own principles and restrictions. If there was a word to describe it, it would be aristocrat. If there was a word to add, it would be mysterious. After all, there was no record of such a vampire from anywhere. However, it was precisely because of this that Wu Ming felt that the other party had the means to deal with the demon god pillar. One must know that keeping a mysterious might not work in other worlds, but in the X-Moon world, it was a universal pass. In short, Wu Ming felt that the other party had that kind of ability. However, even if that was the case, Wu Ming could not choose not to take action. In that case, you stay here alone, we will go there ourselves. Without forcing Ison, Wu Ming took Atlanta away and went to meet with Romo. Before leaving, Atlanta once again stared at Ison fiercely, which scared Ison again. Without caring about Ison, Wu Ming found Demetrius. Since Ison is not willing to go, then Demetrius, you will send us there. Wu Ming said with a smile. Me. Demetrius was a little panicked. After all, at the moment, her spirit base was still that of an innocent little girl. Such a solemn task could be said to be quite difficult for her. Didn't you learn the magic I taught you? Now is the time to test you, Demetrius. Open the place where your eyes can reach. Wu Ming pointed to the direction of the demon god pillar. When Wu Ming said that, Demetrius was stunned. That's right, this is the time to test my results. Immediately afterward, under Wu Ming's encouraging eyes, Demetrius nodded heavily. Yes. I will work hard, teacher. Immediately afterward, Demetrius closed her eyes and began to activate the teleportation gate magic, or rather, magic. Wu Ming directly shared his memories and feelings of using the teleportation gate with Demetrius. Since Demetrius had confidently said that she had learned it, then she must have learned it. Wu Ming did not think that as a famous magician of the gods, Demetrius would deliberately deceive him because she could not learn such magic. As a result, as expected. Gate. Demetrius opened her eyes, raised her magic wand and shouted. Immediately afterward, a pinkish-purple ripple as tall as a person appeared in front of Wu Ming and the other two. Atlanta and Romo looked at the pinkish-purple ripple with an indescribable expression. This made Demetrius blush instantly. What? The pinkish-purple ripple filled the heart of a young girl. However, Wu Ming could only helplessly smile bitterly. This was really in line with Demetrius's character. Well done, Demetrius. You are indeed my disciple. After all, the necessary praise could not be lacking. Yes, thank you for your praise, teacher. After hearing her teacher's praise, Demetrius's face changed from red to normal. Although the color was a little strange, it was obvious that Demetrius had successfully released the teleportation gate. After nodding to Atlanta and Romo, the two walked into the teleportation gate. Then Wu Ming looked at Demetrius. If possible, I really don't want my excellent disciple to fall into the hands of that guy. That guy was undoubtedly referring to Ison. But teacher, I am deeply in love with Lord Ison now. Demetrius did not care about Wu Ming's words. Instead, she showed a faint smile. Forget it, as long as you are happy, my disciple. Wu Ming shook his head with a smile and walked into the teleportation gate. I wish you good luck, teacher. Demetrius prayed silently. Chapter 538. In the city of Alexandria, which had become a battlefield, there were ruins everywhere. And under the ruins there were many residents who lived in the city. Compared to Greece, Celtic, and even Japan, Rome could be described as a force that was incomparably generous to civilians. After all, it was Rome, so it was not surprising. In this way, many residents would choose to live in the safest capital. Those people who were crushed under the ruins were such existences. However, the demon god pillar did not care about the life and death of those people. In other words, these residents would be attacked indiscriminately like the servants. Of course, the premise was that the servants didn't do anything. Matthew effortlessly lifted a stone slab that was pressing on a woman. Gadazzi quickly went up and helped the woman up. Are you okay? I will take you to a safe place. Gadazzi said eagerly. Child? My child? The woman said weakly, looking at the collapsed house. Gadazzi and Matthew could not bear to look at the woman. The possibility of a baby being crushed under such a collapsed house was almost zero. However, as if there was a temporary traffic jam in the underworld, the baby did not lose his life. Wah wah, as if he heard the voice of his mother, a baby's cry came. My child. The woman wanted to rush to the ruins to save her child. However, she was seriously injured, and after leaving Gadazzi's support, she directly collapsed to the ground. Are you okay? Don't worry, we will save your child. Gadazzi quickly supported the woman who collapsed to the ground. Then Gadazzi nodded to Matthew. Matthew was stunned, nodded, and was ready to save the child. Human life is so strong and beautiful. Matthew smiled and thought. Then, a tentacle suddenly stretched out, or rather, smashed down. The target seemed to be Gadotsi. Matthew naturally quickly came to Gadotsi's side and blocked the attack with his shield. After Matthew came to Gadotsi's side, Gadotsi's wrist suddenly made a sound. Matthew, its target is the child. As if confirming the voice's words, the tentacle dramatically and strangely changed its direction, and its target was the ruins where the baby's cry came from. No! The child's mother screamed at the top of her lungs, trying to stop the tentacles. However, it all happened so fast that Gadotsi, the woman, and even Matthew were powerless to stop it. Matthew did not expect the tentacles to be so strange. Using Gadotsi as bait, he forced Matthew to change the formation. As a result, his target became the baby under the ruins. Just like that, the tentacle fell towards the baby. Just as the tentacle was about to fall, a voice sounded in Mashu's and Gudazi's ears. Brahmastra, indestructible Rakshasa. In an instant, the indestructible blade spun with thunder and hit the tentacle. The tentacle was sent flying with an indescribable sound that sounded like a scream. The powerful and perfectly controlled power did not hurt the ruins below when it sent the tentacle flying. Taking advantage of this moment, Matthew went directly to the place where the baby was crying. He used his magic to gently clean up the ruins, revealing the cute child who was miraculously alive in the corner. Although the baby was still crying, it was indeed a symbol of life in everyone's eyes. Great! Matthew quickly picked up the baby, came to the woman, and handed the baby to the woman, the baby's mother. Thank you, my child, my child. After hurriedly thanking Gadotsi and Matthew, the woman held her child and kept talking. The indestructible blade flew back after sending the tentacle monkey flying. Matthew looked at the person in surprise. It's really Mr. Rama? It was Rama's noble phantasm that sent the tentacle flying. But Gadotsi was concerned about another thing. In other words, assassin is also here. Gadotsi looked around, but she did not find any trace of Wuming. At this time, looking at Gadotsi who was searching around, Rama spoke. Don't look for him, my friend is not here. Then Gadotsi's little face looked like she was crying. How could this be? On the other side, Sharon and the other so-called main battle servants were in charge of attacking. Why Elizabeth jumped and dodged a huge tentacle attack. How rude, how could you treat a lady like this? While Elizabeth patted the dust on her dress with lingering fear and said with dissatisfaction. Miss, what time is it now? Do you still care about those things? Robin Hood complained, rolled, and fired a few useless shots at the huge demon god pillar not far away. Take care of yourself, green rat. Why Elizabeth shouted at Robin Hood angrily. Robin Hood could only helplessly take a few steps back, a look of discomfort on his face. Then the blue and white flame flew past Elizabeth's hair. Why Elizabeth screamed in fear. Do you want to kill me? Why Elizabeth touched her hair and looked at Kyoheim with tears in her eyes. Sure enough, your lizard is useless. Kyoheim did not answer why Elizabeth directly, but released the flame at the demon god pillar while mocking why Elizabeth. Of course, Kyoheim's attack was not very effective. Do you want to fight, fire-breathing snake? Why Elizabeth stared at Kyoheim fiercely. Come on, I'm not afraid of you. And Kyoheim also stared back at Elizabeth. Sigh, Robin Hood sighed helplessly. This is a battlefield, young missus. The enemy is a demon god pillar. Take it easy, even if they seriously deal with the demon god pillar, it won't have any effect. Billy Boy, who suddenly appeared, pressed his hat, and his face was full of helplessness. After hearing Billy Boy's words, Robin Hood also showed a helpless smile. As a servant, their spiritual base was too low, and they couldn't cause damage to the demon god pillar. They couldn't even attract or restrain it. Only a few tentacles attacked them, and they were the waterproof kind. Because the other tentacles were attacking Sharon. Geronimo, who was following behind Billy Boy, frowned helplessly and looked to the north. I hope the second team can complete the mission smoothly. Then they could support them. Then, Geronimo saw the lightning that represented the indestructible blade and smiled. They're coming. Chapter 539. On the so-called head-on battlefield. Ka Rong transformed into a centaur, attacking the demon god pillars with his bow in the midst of the mechanical infantry. Sharon was able to hit the demon god pillar's eyes with his skills. Why was it only at the beginning? It was because the demon god pillar was no fool and knew how to defend. Karen retreated slightly, and countless mechanical infantry rushed towards the demon god pillar. However, the demon god pillar only needed to use a few dozen tentacles to directly blow up the mechanical infantry that were attacking it. This is a disaster. Edison roared as he hugged the lion's head behind the countless mechanical infantry soldiers. So noisy. Be quiet. But at Madame Blavatsky's snarl, Edison obediently held his tongue. If this continues, we will be wiped out. Sharon frowned and came to the two to see if they could come up with a plan. The three looked at Nightingale, who was charging with the mechanical soldiers but was constantly being pushed back. They felt helpless and relieved. If not for Nightingale's stubborn personality, she would not have attracted the demon god pillar. After all, it was a berserker. However, if this continues, something will happen to Miss Nightingale. Helena looked worriedly at Nightingale, who was constantly spinning and jumping under the demon god pillar's tentacles and was sent flying again. As if toying with Nightingale, the demon god pillar did not use its full strength. Although it seemed like the demon god pillar's attacks were ineffective, Sharon and the others noticed that the demon god pillar was going easy on them. Otherwise, it would not have the time to attack Matthew and the others. If we look at the worst-case scenario, this demon god pillar might be smarter than we thought. Helena frowned as if she was facing a great enemy. I have a bad feeling. I feel like the demon god pillar is waiting for something. Karen's face darkened. This way, the demon god pillar was definitely scheming something. Edison was like a lion and did not understand the conversation between the two. At this moment, a voice resounded through the sky. A gigantic spear of light that had never appeared before came from afar and hit the demon god pillar. The demon god pillar let out an unrecognizable voice. It was obvious that the noble artifact's owner had poured a huge amount of magic into this attack. The noble artifact was released. That was the Holy King's voice. Edison said as he looked around for Wu Ming. Over there. Sharon pointed. At this moment, Wu Ming, with his A+ great agility, launched a surprise attack on the demon god pillar. At this moment, Wu Ming had already put on his armor and wore a helmet that completely covered his head. Wu Ming was like a silver dragon. As for the demon god pillar, it was as if the person it was waiting for had arrived. Regardless of whether it was the mechanical infantry or Nightingale, the demon god pillar no longer cared about them. Countless tentacles extended from the demon god pillar's muscles to attack. Wu Ming at the same time. The Wu Ming was the demon god pillars and Wu Ming. Countless tentacles surrounded Wu Ming from all directions, which could be described as a killing move for ordinary servants. However, for Wu Ming, although it was dangerous, it was not fatal. Wu Ming did not stop and continued to run toward the demon god pillar, ignoring the Wu Ming's corrosive tentacles. The air vibrated and a buzzing sound was heard. Then the magic around Wu Ming's body condensed, and under Wu Ming's control, the condensed magic exploded in the surroundings. Boom! A dull sound was heard, and a ring of magic that could be seen with the naked eye spread out from Wu Ming in an instant. The encirclement formed by the Wu Ming's tentacles was instantly broken through by the magic that could be seen with the naked eye. Like petals, the tentacles were fragmented and turned into pure magic that dissipated. This was pure power that did not require any fancy tricks. What? Helena was shocked when she saw this scene. What's wrong? Edison asked cautiously. Madame Blavatsky was just sighing at his strength. Sharon smiled helplessly and explained to Edison. Just the simple release of magic was enough to destroy the metal of the tentacles that everyone worked together to destroy. From this, it could be seen how powerful Wu Ming was in terms of the amount and control of magic. Compressing a large amount of magic, condensing it around his body, and then releasing the compressed magic in the form of Wu Ming's magic was a test of his control. And the premise of this was that he had sufficient magic power. It can be said that the magic power just now was comparable to the magic power required by the light spear, or even exceeded it by a lot. To be able to use the magic power of such a noble artifact to release magic power, it was not something that a first-rate servant could do. It could be said that even a first-rate servant would not have such magic power. After all, if the amount of magic power was not enough, it would be impossible to do it. And to be able to use that kind of magic power twice without batting an eyelid, it could be seen that Wu Ming was not ordinary. The most important thing was that Wu Ming only used magic power to destroy the tentacles, which was enough to prove that Wu Ming was powerful. True power was not a fancy ability, but a kind of power that had reached the pinnacle. So that's how it is, Your Excellency Holy Ruler is indeed Your Excellency Holy Ruler, to be so powerful. Edison's lion head showed an expression of sudden realization. However, such an expression was quite comical in the eyes of others. Since the Holy Ruler is here, it means that the Greek side has been resolved. Helena breathed a sigh of relief. Sharon seemed to agree with Helena's opinion and nodded. However, I feel a little uneasy about the demon god pillar here. Sharon looked at the demon god pillar. As a sage who had taught many heroes, Sharon had a feeling. That demon god pillar was not an ordinary one, but one with a strong will. It could be seen from the previous performance, so Sharon was very worried that the other side was up to something. However, even if there was a conspiracy, such a battle was not something they could investigate. In short, we should take this opportunity to save a few more injured residents. We can't let down Tachika's sincerity. The three nodded and slipped away from the battlefield. At the same time, they also took away Nightingale, who still wanted to charge at the demon god pillar. Edison brought the few remaining mechanical infantry and began to search for survivors. On Wuming's side, Wuming looked at the demon god pillar and vaguely felt a sense of familiarity. But even so, Wuming's actions did not stop. Wuming waved his hand and the holy spear of light appeared out of nowhere and landed in Wuming's hand. Then Wuming raised the spear of light to his shoulder and threw it at the demon god pillar like a javelin. The spear of light gradually thinned and turned into a needle of light. However, the demon god pillar only summoned a few more tentacles, blocking the needle of light. Wuming was not surprised. After all, Wuming had only injected a small amount of magic power, so it was not surprising that the demon god pillar could block it. At this moment, the demon god pillar suddenly spoke. Dragon of Origin, you're finally here. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.